What is going on? Putting Mom in a storage shed. Oh, that. I just got tired of taking care of her. I can't help it, okay? What? Are you kidding me? When I went to my mother-in-law's house to take her to the hot springs, we found her trembling in the storage shed in a pitiful state. I was speechless at my sister-in-law's inhumane actions and the appalling conditions she had subjected my mother-in-law to. Little did I know that divine retribution was about to befall my sister-in-law. I am a 46-year-old housewife, and my husband is also 46. We have a son who recently moved out to attend college in another state. I had expected him to attend a local university and live with us for a few more years, even after starting his career. However, children often leave the nest earlier than their parents anticipate. Unexpectedly, my husband and I found ourselves with more free time, just the two of us. How about we go on a spa vacation this long weekend? My husband suggested. Lately, he's been coming home early, likely due to recent changes in the work culture. He also seems to be going out for drinks a lot less. That sounds wonderful, I replied. Our first trip alone since our honeymoon, right? Not just vacations. I can't even remember the last time we went out to eat, just the two of us. It's been that long. Yeah, but how about inviting your mom this time? I suggested, surprising my husband. Although we're both in our 40s and still physically capable of taking care of my mother-in-law during the trip, we've declined her invitations multiple times since our son started grade school, often using parenting as an excuse. My husband had also been declining due to work commitments. Without opportunities like this, we might grow distant from her. After I explained my reasons, my husband agreed. My mother-in-law currently lives with my sister-in-law and her husband, so we decided to reach out to her. I thought it might be better handled between women, so I called my sister-in-law. Perfect timing, she said. We were about to go on a trip and didn't know what to do with Mom. Luckily, I found someone who can take care of her. We were on speakerphone because my husband wanted to speak to his mother. When my sister-in-law made her self-centered comment, he was livid. Hey, what the hell do you mean by that? He demanded. Oh, would you look at the time? We're going to miss our flight. My sister-in-law brushed off his concern, emphasizing her own busyness and abruptly ending the call. What the hell is my sister doing? Is Mom okay with her acting like that? My husband fumed. The excitement of reuniting with his mother after so long was overshadowed by growing anxiety. We need to go there right now, he declared urgently. The in-laws' house is situated in the same city, though our neighborhood is a newly developed area that has expanded over the last 2 decades. In contrast, the vicinity around their home still boasts houses dating back to the 1920s. Although my sister-in-law and her husband moved in with my mother-in-law and renovated the house, it retains an old-world charm. After a 20-minute drive, we arrived at the in-laws' house. We could see the roof, but the front door was locked, and our attempts to call and knock went unanswered. I tried reaching Lisa to inquire about a spare key, but couldn't get through. Our anxiety grew as we frantically searched around the mailbox, under plant pots, and in other possible spots for a hidden key. Suddenly, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a figure. John was exploring nearby when he also noticed it. Could she be in here? He murmured, peering into the shed. Then he shouted in shock. I hurried over and found my mother-in-law wrapped in cardboard, shivering uncontrollably. Mom, I exclaimed. She was barely dressed, barefoot with disheveled hair and a pale face. Her skin looked dry, and there was an unsettling odor. Her appearance was less concerning than her well-being. How long had she been left in this state? We need to warm her up quickly. I know, damn it. Should we break the window to get in? John suggested urgently. Hold on, what about the backyard window? It might be open, I proposed. The backyard was shielded from the street, offering a chance that they might have forgotten to secure it. John hurried over and, as I had hoped, found the window unlocked. He entered the house, unlocked the front door, and brought his mother inside. From then on, we operated with seamless coordination, like a well-rehearsed team. I warmed the room while John wrapped her in blankets. I changed her clothes while he prepared the bath. As I bathed her, he readied the bed, and together we settled her in. Oh, it's so warm. It's like heaven, his mother murmured, closing her eyes as she seemed to drift off to sleep. Your mom should have a family doctor at her age, right? I suggested, contemplating the urgency of the situation. We needed medical assistance but couldn't locate her room. As I searched for a change of clothes for her, I couldn't shake an uneasy feeling. It became evident we were facing a life-threatening scenario, prompting me to borrow clothes from Lisa. Despite her extensive wardrobe, none of the clothes seemed suitable for my mother-in-law. We scored for her insurance card and prescription information to no avail, leading us to search online for a doctor who could conduct a home visit. Once secured, John promptly alerted the authorities. Upon arrival, the doctor emphasized the critical timing of our intervention. Delay could have been disastrous, especially given the severe winter conditions and the potential for snow in the mountains. The examination revealed signs of malnutrition and dehydration from severely limited food and water intake. Additionally, her neglected living conditions had caused a distressing skin rash and even lice infestation, a shocking development in modern times. The doctor prescribed medications and urged us to arrange a follow-up with her regular family doctor as soon as possible. As we searched for her insurance card and essential items, we came across the contact details for the caregiving service that had been responsible for her well-being. Luckily, it was still saved in the home phone's contacts. Recognizing the urgency of the situation, we reached out to understand what had transpired during the period we were preoccupied with our own lives. After contacting the service, we learned that Lisa had abruptly terminated the contract without prior notice, leaving them unable to intervene further. The caregiver expressed genuine concern for my mother-in-law, mentioning occasional bruises that hinted at possible domestic abuse. They had attempted to address this delicate issue with Lisa, but she had evaded their inquiries. Years of daily abuse? Was my mother enduring this? John exclaimed angrily. Damn it. Yes, we were overwhelmed when our first child arrived, but that doesn't justify neglecting my mother's welfare. I deeply regretted interpreting my mother-in-law's words. It's okay, it's okay. As a mother, it's natural that your child comes first, as mere reassurance. Looking back, our frequent invitations for us to visit may have been cries for help, a plea to escape Lisa's mistreatment. Voicing my regret, I confessed to my husband, who reassured me, it's not your fault. I'm equally responsible, if not more so. Now, only Lisa and her husband hold the truth. We won't know for sure until we hear it from them. But Lisa is capable of such actions without remorse. Anticipating potential disputes over what was said or omitted, we decided to record all our future phone conversations. Lisa reluctantly answered the phone, sounding annoyed to be interrupted during her vacation. However, when my husband raised his voice, she begrudgingly began to speak, her tone flat and detached. I listened intently to the conversation on speakerphone. My mother's forgetfulness was really starting to grate on my nerves. I got so frustrated and just gave her a little shove, but she happened to be standing at the top of the stairs. She tumbled down like a sack of potatoes. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Lisa was referring to her own mother as a sack of potatoes, and her tone suggested she found it somewhat amusing. Then she couldn't get up on her own. I knew it was serious, but I was just so tired of dealing with everything, so I decided to put her in the shed. Lisa continued casually. You know how you store things you don't need or can't use in the shed? It's like that, she added, laughing. It was clear that Lisa was treating her own mother like an object, dismissing her as useless despite the fact that she had given birth to her and raised her. The selfishness of her attitude made me feel physically ill. The caregiver doesn't know about this, so it's fine. Just make sure nothing unnecessary happens, okay? It dawned on me then that Lisa understood the severity of the situation after she pushed her mother down the stairs, which led her to abruptly cancel the caregiving services. She spoke callously, saying things like, as long as she has water, she'll be fine for a week, and if she starts wandering around, we can just tie her up. It was horrifying and utterly unbearable to hear. Oh, and you guys should cooperate too. If things keep going like this, she's going to die from weakness. If she does pass peacefully, I'm considering sharing some of the inheritance with you guys. Not a bad deal, right? Lisa's tone conveyed a chilling belief in her flawless plan, punctuated by an unsettling laugh. Her proposal defied all reason and veered into madness. Listening to Lisa, I felt a deep unease as though she herself were a dangerous weapon. Fear gripped me and I couldn't stop shaking. Meanwhile, my husband handled the situation calmly, allowing Lisa to explain without immediate objection, merely nodding along. He ambiguously responded to her plea for cooperation, neither fully accepting nor rejecting it. His strategy was to lower her defenses and encourage her to return home. Unbeknownst to Lisa, the police we had alerted had already arrived at her location and were monitoring our phone conversations. They instructed us to extract as much information as possible from her and to prevent her from escaping by feigning agreement with her plans. John, my husband, seemed poised to denounce and condemn Lisa's actions outright. I couldn't bear to witness the anguish on his face again, the strain of suppressing his emotions while listening to Lisa. I fervently hoped we would soon emerge from this sorrowful ordeal. Unaware of our collaboration with the police, Lisa and her husband enjoyed their vacation to the fullest. Exactly 1 week after we discovered their mistreatment of my mother-in-law, they returned home. As Lisa spoke about her mother, I casually inquired about their return schedule. Little did they know, the police were waiting to apprehend them upon their arrival. An arrest warrant had already been issued, and they were taken into custody as soon as the document was presented. "What's going on? You're my own brother, selling out your sister to the cops? What a lowlife you are. And you cops, watch where you're touching me. I'll sue you, mark my words." Lisa, a middle-aged woman, spat out her words like a washed-up thug. John regarded his sister with a mixture of disdain and disappointment. "The real lowlife here is you," John retorted calmly. "Hey officer, that guy, my brother, he's a sly fox. Always been a liar with a honeyed voice," Lisa continued, attempting to smear my husband's reputation. She then boldly asserted, "Mom has been suffering from dementia for years. No matter how many times I explain it, she insists the storage shed is her home. Isn't it better to let her do as she pleases? Even doctors say that yelling at dementia patients only makes things worse." But we already had Lisa's confession recorded. When John played back the phone conversation, Lisa and her husband paled visibly and sank to the ground. "From now on, you'll be behind bars. We've already completed the necessary procedures while you were away. Don't act so superior, dumping the responsibility of that helpless old woman on us. You have no right. You insisted on remaining childless so you could care for our aging parents instead. It was you, Lisa, who asked us to forfeit our share of the inheritance," my husband said calmly. "It seemed this was an arrangement they had made before John and I were married. You were the one who broke the pact first. If it was too much for you, you could have told me. That would have been fine with me," John said with a choked voice, expressing his readiness to care for his parents. Lisa's initial plan was to care for her mother in exchange for claiming all of the inheritance. However, her mother unexpectedly remained resilient and lived longer than expected. Unable to tolerate this, Lisa devised a plan to make her mother's passing appear natural due to frailty. As for the ownership of the family home, it remained in their mother's name since their father's death. Fortunately, the property was not in Lisa's name. Therefore, we decided to demolish the deteriorated family home and convert it into an empty lot. We plan to sell the lot later. The demolition date has already been set, so please remove your personal belongings as soon as possible." "You must be joking. I'm under arrest, you idiot. How am I supposed to do that?" "We've rented a storage unit for 3 years to store your belongings. It will be paid for from your savings," John informed Lisa. "What? Who gave you the right to make decisions on your own? You used to be a crybaby, always running to your big sister. Now suddenly you've grown a spine." Lisa raged, incensed that John had taken charge of her finances. Despite her protests, John remained composed. He added that if the lease couldn't be extended after 3 years, they had the right to dispose of the contents. Lisa could only stare in disbelief, unable to argue. It was a clear victory for us. The police intervened, declaring that enough had been said. They escorted Lisa and her husband into a waiting police car. Resisting until the last moment, they were carried away like uncooperative luggage. In the days that followed, the demolition of our parents' house proceeded smoothly. It turned out that my mother-in-law had not been suffering from dementia after all. Her forgetfulness was simply a part of aging, a common experience that doesn't typically inconvenience others. I too sometimes forget what I was about to do, only to recall it later. Similarly, my mother-in-law was like that. Thanks to her, Lisa had no legal grounds to contest the decision to demolish the house, as my mother-in-law was the rightful owner. Since Lisa and her husband didn't retrieve their belongings from the house, we proceeded with the demolition, leaving their possessions inside. Now they are incarcerated. It appeared they were unaware they could have preserved their belongings by making appropriate arrangements, such as hiring a company to move them with the assistance of a court-appointed attorney. Their actions became widely known after being featured on television in a segment titled "True Stories That Seem Unbelievable," likening their behavior to a modern-day abandonment of elders. Subsequently, Lisa and her husband were charged with elder abuse and neglect by the authorities responsible for their protection. They were found guilty and are likely to face a significant period of incarceration. We successfully sold the vacant plot for a substantial sum. In addition, we decided to sell our current house, located in a highly sought-after area, which fetched a good price even as a used property. With these funds, we built a new home for the three of us, including my mother-in-law, in a location where we envision spending our elderly years comfortably. The new house is single-story and designed to be elderly-friendly, situated in a town with convenient bus services and excellent care facilities. Since moving, my mother-in-law has shown remarkable improvement in her health. She walks with a straight posture and faithfully performs her daily morning exercises. She now enjoys gardening with me, tending to our vegetable patch every day. Soon, we'll be enjoying the fruits of our labor together at the dinner table.
Hi, I'm Emily. My dad was everything to me. We were a team, just me and him ever since Mom died when I was little. Dad was a truck driver, always pulling long hours to make sure we had enough. Every night over dinner, he'd talk about the importance of sticking it out in school, making something of myself. He managed to save just enough to get me started in college. It was at college during orientation week that I bumped into Mark. Literally bumped into him, spilling his coffee all over his shirt. "Watch it," he snapped at first, eyes flashing annoyance. Then, his face softened as he took a good look at me. "Sorry, that was harsh. Let's start over. I'm Mark." "Emily," I mumbled, still mortified about the coffee. "Really sorry about the shirt." "It's just coffee. No harm done," he laughed, waving it off. "You here to study what, Emily?" "Financial analysis," I replied. He grinned, pointing to himself. "Same here. Looks like we're gonna be classmates." Mark was charming, with a quick smile and quicker wit. We hit it off instantly. Spending time with him felt easy, like slipping into a warm bath. Before long, we were thick as thieves, hanging out after classes, studying together, and grabbing late-night snacks at the 24-hour diner near campus. Then, just as I thought life was finally on my way up, it crashed. Dad died unexpectedly. Heart attack, out of the blue. The rug was pulled from under me, and down I went. There were no savings, nothing but the apartment we lived in. College funds? Gone. My world, my plans, all up in smoke. I was lost, but Mark stepped in. One evening, a few weeks after the funeral, he came over with a six-pack and a takeout box from our favorite Chinese place. We sat on the worn-out couch in my living room, surrounded by Dad's old books and pictures. "What about moving in together?" Mark said, his voice firm. "You know, cut down on expenses. We could make it work." I stared at the floor, not sure what to think. I don't know, Mark. I can barely afford to keep this place. Listen, we get married, move in here together. I'll keep studying, you work for now, and when I'm done, it's your turn. I'll support us then," he proposed, his eyes earnest. The idea sounded crazy, but there was a sincere ring to it. Maybe it was the grief fogging my brain, or maybe it was the desperate hope fluttering in my chest, but I nodded slowly. "Okay, let's do it. But promise me, when you graduate, it'll be my turn." "Promise," he said, reaching across to squeeze my hand. We got married 2 months later at a courthouse, with a couple of Mark's friends as witnesses. Dad's apartment became our home, our little island in the storm. My days blurred into nights as I shuffled between 2 jobs, just to keep our heads above water. By day, I was slinging coffee and plates at a bustling cafe, and by night, I sold pastries at a local bakery. Exhaustion became my constant companion, but quitting wasn't an option, not with Mark buried in his textbooks and our bills piling up. Mark's study schedule meant he was home a lot. You'd think that would make things easier, but it didn't. He had his finals coming up, and the stress turned him into a bear. The smallest things set him off, especially if dinner wasn't ready when he expected it. One night, I came home later than usual, my arms aching and my feet swollen from the long shifts. The house was dark except for the flicker of the lamp over Mark's study table. I dropped my keys on the counter and winced at the noise. Almost instantly, Mark's head popped out from his books, his brows knitted in annoyance. "Where have you been?" "I've been waiting to eat. There's nothing ready?" His voice was sharp, each word like a jab. I sighed, leaning against the doorframe. "I'm sorry, Mark. The bakery was slammed today. I haven't even had a chance to take off my shoes yet." "Well, I'm starving. I can't study on an empty stomach, Em." His voice softened a bit, but the irritation was still there, hanging between us like a thick fog. "I'll fix something quick," I mumbled, pushing past the fatigue. I rummaged through the fridge, pulling together what little we had to whip up some scrambled eggs and toast. Not exactly gourmet, but it was the best I could do on short notice. It wasn't just the stress of our living situation weighing on me. There were also Mark's parents, Richard and Marianne. Both well-educated, well-spoken, and well-off, they never missed a chance to remind me that I didn't quite fit their idea of a suitable match for their son. Visiting them was an ordeal. Their old house was like a fortress of books and high culture. Each room overflowed with literature and artifacts from their travels around the world. The first time I stepped into their living room, Marianne had eyed my second-hand jeans and faded college sweater before offering a thin-lipped smile. "Emily, dear, have you read the latest by Jonathan Franzen?" "Oh, but of course, you've been too busy working your, how many jobs is it now?" Her tone was honeyed poison. Richard was no better. "It's a fascinating treatise on the socio-political landscape of contemporary America. But, let's discuss something simpler." His chuckle was a soft knife, and I felt my cheeks burn with humiliation. I tried to hold my own, to nod along, to throw in a comment here and there, but it was like shooting arrows in the dark. Eventually, I stopped trying. One evening, after a particularly grueling shift at the cafe, I mustered the courage to tell Mark how I felt. "Your parents, they don't think I'm good enough for you, do they?" I asked him as he clicked away on his laptop. Mark didn't look up. "Look, they're my parents. They have their ways, but they mean well." "You're overreacting." I knew then that arguing was pointless. He couldn't see it, wouldn't see it. So, I pulled back, retreating into my shell of work and solitude. Mark continued to visit his parents alone, often staying overnight. I wasn't invited, and I didn't ask to be. When Mark finally graduated and landed a decent job with a good salary, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Now it's my turn, right? I remember asking him one evening as we sat down for a rare quiet dinner. Mark had just started talking about his new role at the company, buzzing with excitement over the projects he was handling. "Yeah, about that," he said, his fork pausing midair. "Look, Em, things are tight right now. The job pays well, but we've got bills, debts. You know how it is." I nodded, biting back my disappointment. "I get that, but we talked about this, Mark. It's supposed to be my turn. I was thinking I could start with just a couple of classes. I'll keep working at the bakery to help out." He shook his head, a frown creasing his forehead. "Emily, be realistic. We need every penny we can get. Forget about college for now." The resentment that had been simmering inside me boiled over. "I supported you," I snapped. "I worked 2 jobs, Mark, so you could have this, so we could have this. And now you're telling me to forget my dreams?" He didn't look at me. "It's not like that, and you know it. Things change. We need to be practical." Practical. The word hung in the air between us, heavy and cold. But before I could argue further, life threw us another curveball. I found out I was pregnant. All thoughts of school were pushed to the back burner as we prepared for our new arrival. Lily came into our lives like a storm, fierce and beautiful. I threw myself into motherhood with all I had, but the strain on our marriage didn't ease. If anything, it grew worse. Mark was distant, often coming home late, and when he was around, he critiqued my parenting. "You need to push her more, Em," he'd say as he watched me play with Lily. "She needs to start learning early." I've signed her up for French lessons and a toddler developmental center. She's 2, Mark, I would protest, feeling the familiar flare of anger. She needs to play, to be a kid. Mark had been sorting through some papers, not really listening. At that, he looked up, his expression hard. Maybe if you had some education, Emily, you'd understand the importance of what I'm doing for her. The words said a lot. They said I was just the uneducated wife, good enough to work and pay bills, but not good enough to be a real partner in raising our daughter. When Lily turned 5, the gap between me and my family widened into a chasm. Mark's parents took it upon themselves to completely oversee her upbringing. They showed up at every school event, every concert, parading around as if they were the primary caregivers. Mark didn't just allow this, he encouraged it. It got to the point where he actually forbade me from attending school events. Emily, you don't have the education to understand what's going on there. It's best if you stay home, he said one evening, his tone final, leaving no room for argument. I felt my face flush with hurt and anger. So, what? I'm not good enough to see my daughter perform? Is that what you're saying? Mark shrugged, indifferent. It's about what's best for Lily. My parents can provide the kind of support and image we need to project. You being there, it's just not right. I was stunned, words failing me as the sting of rejection from my own husband sank in. This wasn't just about me anymore, it was about our daughter, and the warped lessons she was learning about worth and family. Lily's behavior started changing too. She no longer saw me as an authority figure, much less a mother. When I asked her to tidy her room or finish her vegetables, she'd scoff and say, "Grandma says I don't have to listen to you." It broke my heart every single time. As Lily grew older, her disregard turned into embarrassment. One day, when Lily was about 13, she had friends over for a study group. I was vacuuming, lost in my thoughts about how distant our relationship had become. I turned the corner into the hallway, and there was Lily, her friends trailing behind her. Seeing me, she hesitated for just a second. Her eyes darted from me to her friends, and then, as if she'd made a decision, she said, "Oh, that's just the housekeeper." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stood there, frozen, as her friends nodded casually and followed her into the room. As soon as I was sure they were out of earshot, I rushed to the bathroom, tears streaming down my face. How had it come to this? How had I become a stranger in my own daughter's eyes? That evening, after Lily's friends had left and we were alone in the kitchen, I confronted Mark. "Did you know what Lily calls me in front of her friends? The housekeeper. That's what she thinks of me, thanks to you and your parents." Mark didn't even have the decency to look surprised. He just kept scrolling through his phone. "Well, what did you expect, Emily? You set yourself up for that by never pushing back. If she doesn't respect you, it's because you never demanded it." I stared at him, the man I had married, the man I had supported through college, and didn't recognize him. He was a stranger, one who valued appearances over family, image over substance. Turning 36 was supposed to be a fresh start, a chance to mend fences and rebuild the bridges. With that little hope, I booked a table at one of the nicer restaurants in town, a place where Mark and I once celebrated happier times. I even splurged on a new dress, something simple yet elegant, hoping to light up Mark's eyes like I used to. I came home that evening, the fabric of my new dress swishing softly against my legs, feeling a mix of nerves and excitement. "Mark, Lily, hurry up and get ready. I booked us a table for my birthday. It's going to be special," I announced, trying to inject some cheer into my voice. Mark looked up from his laptop, his face blank, while Lily didn't even bother to pause her video game. "Go out with you? In that?" Mark snorted first, and then Lily joined in, her laughter sharp and mocking. "What's wrong?" I frowned, looking down at my dress. "You think you look good? You look like a scarecrow," Lily scoffed, her words slicing through me. "I'm not going anywhere with you. You'll just embarrass us. Yeah, let's not pretend we're some happy family. You're just an ignorant loser, Emily. What were you thinking?" Mark's voice was cruel, devoid of any warmth. The room spun a little, their words hitting like physical blows. But I thought we could all have dinner together. Like a family, I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper. A family? With you? Mark laughed, cold and harsh. He thrust an envelope at me. Confused, I opened it slowly. It was a divorce application. This is my final gift to you, he said, his tone final. I stood there, the paper shaking in my hands. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be. We're moving out, Mom. To the nice part of town, with Dad. There's no place for you there, Lily added, her voice echoing her father's disdain. You can keep this old place. They packed their bags that night. I watched, numb and broken, as they hauled their belongings out of the apartment. Mark didn't look back, his steps never faltering. Lily followed him, her eyes avoiding mine, as if I were a stranger, not the mother who had cradled her, soothed her nightmares, and cheered for every little milestone. The door slammed shut, the sound echoing through the now empty apartment. I sank to the floor, my birthday dress crumpled beneath me, the divorce papers clutched in my fist. The tears came then, hot and unending, mourning not just the end of my marriage, but the loss of my daughter, my family, my whole world. The divorce was a brutal affair, stripped of any dignity or semblance of the love. When Mark sued for sole custody of Lily, claiming I was unfit due to my educational status and financial instability, the courtroom felt colder than any place I had ever been. Sitting there, the harsh lights of the courtroom felt like a spotlight, illuminating every failure I ever thought I had hidden. My in-laws were there, right beside Mark, united in their disdain for me. Richard, with his sharp suit and sharper tongue, didn't miss a chance to emphasize my inadequacies. She simply lacks the capabilities to provide Lily with the environment she needs, Richard testified, his voice smooth and confident. Her lack of education and refinement, quite frankly, it's not up to the standard a child like Lily deserves. Marianne nodded along, her agreement silent but palpable in the tight press of her lips. I wanted to scream, to tell them that love can't be measured in diplomas or bank statements, but the words choked in my throat, strangled by the weight of my grief. When it was my turn to speak, my voice was a mere whisper, barely audible even in the hushed courtroom. I have always done my best for Lily. I love her more than anything, and all I've ever wanted was to make her happy. The judge looked at me, his expression unreadable, and then scribbled some notes that felt like the final nails in the coffin of my parental rights. The gavel fell with a sound that echoed like a door slamming shut on my heart. Custody was granted to Mark, and with it, a clear message: I was not enough. Walking out of the courthouse, the sky was a brilliant blue, mocking me with its clarity. I felt anything but clear, everything was a blur, the faces, the city, my future. But amid the chaos of my thoughts, a spark of defiance flickered to life. They thought I was done, that I would crumble, but I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. I turned to my old friend Sarah, who had come to support me at the trial. I'm going back to college, I declared, the words feeling like shards of glass in my mouth, sharp and dangerous. Sarah's eyes widened. Are you sure, Em? After everything? Especially after everything, I said, the resolve hardening inside me like cement. I need to do this, for myself. I need to show them, and me, that I'm more than what they think. The journey back to college was a Herculean task. I scrimped and saved every dime, and took on extra shifts at the bakery. The nights were long, filled with textbooks and the soft hum of my old laptop as I revisited lessons I had abandoned years ago. Social media was a constant reminder of the life I had lost. Pictures of Mark, Lily, and a woman with a too bright smile in luxurious settings filled my feed. They looked happy, untouched by the turmoil they had left in their wake. The sting of their apparent happiness fueled me, driving me to study with even more vigor. By the end of the semester, my grades were at the top of my class. The professors took notice, often using me as an example for younger students. See what determination looks like, they would say, pointing to my work. The recognition was bittersweet. With each accolade, I felt a mix of pride and sorrow. Pride for my achievements, sorrow for the reason behind my drive. But no matter how hard it was, I pushed forward, building a new life from the ashes of the old. Graduation day was a blur of pride and pomp, my name echoing in the auditorium as I walked across the stage, diploma in hand. My professors furnished me with glowing recommendations that opened doors I once thought permanently closed. I landed a job at a reputable financial firm. Starting as a junior analyst, I immersed myself in work, my life becoming a cycle of reports, meetings, and endless learning. Within 5 years, I was leading my own department, a testament to the relentless nights and skipped social outings. Life wasn't just about work, though. I bought a sleek, new car, one that hummed under my touch and gleamed under the city lights. My apartment, once a cramped space filled with reminders of a painful past, was traded in for a modern, spacious loft in a vibrant part of the city. I revamped my wardrobe, my new clothes sharp and empowering, each piece a reflection of the new me. I even changed my hairstyle, opting for a chic cut that framed my face with confidence. Then, one day, as I scrolled through job listings to see what the market was offering, I froze. There, in bold letters, was an opening for a department head at a familiar company. It was Mark's company. The irony wasn't lost on me. A wicked part of me buzzed with the thrill of the potential drama. I applied, driven by the desire to restore justice. The interview was a series of rapid-fire questions, my answers sharp and sure. The panel was impressed, and by the end of the week, I had the job. The head of the company, Mr. Clarkson, introduced me to my new team. Team, this is Emily. She'll be taking over as your new department head. I expect everyone to give her your full cooperation. The room was a mix of curious and welcoming faces, but one stood out, his expression unreadable, Mark. His shock was palpable, his eyes widening as he took in my transformation from the woman he once discarded to the boss he now had to answer to. After the introduction, Mark lingered, his pride obviously bruised. When we were alone with Mr. Clarkson, he couldn't hold back. Why her? I applied for this position. I have more experience with the company. Mr. Clarkson looked from Mark to me, his expression calm. Mark, while your familiarity with the company is appreciated, it's the broader expertise and strong leadership skills we need for this role. Emily brings a fresh perspective and a proven track record that you, frankly, haven't demonstrated. I suggest you learn from her. The words seemed to crush whatever pride Mark had left. He stormed out, slamming the door behind him with a force that echoed through the quiet office. I stood there, the ghost of a smile playing on my lips, not out of spite but out of satisfaction. After the showdown at the office, Mark couldn't handle the new dynamics. Within weeks, he resigned, his departure quiet but the talk of the office. I heard through the corporate grapevine that he struggled to find a similar position elsewhere. Things spiraled for him, and soon, the woman he was living with kicked him and Lily out, tired of his constant joblessness. They moved back in with Richard and Marianne, but it wasn't the comfortable retreat Mark had hoped for. The luxuries Lily was accustomed to were no longer sustainable, and even his parents couldn't indulge her whims as they once had. Reality bit hard, and Lily found it difficult to adjust to their changed circumstances. One afternoon, there was a knock on my new apartment door, the modern, spacious place I had made my sanctuary. I opened it to find Lily standing there, her eyes roaming over the chic decor and the city view that stretched behind me. "Wow, Mom, this place is amazing," she exclaimed, a whistle escaping her lips. "I guess I'll be staying here now." Her words hung between us, expectation thick in the air. I studied her for a moment, my heart aching with a mix of emotions. There she was, standing in my home, as if all the years of neglect and hurt could be wiped clean with a simple decision to move in. "Lily, a fresh start isn't just about a new place to stay. It's about mending things, acknowledging mistakes. I haven't heard you apologize for anything. For how you've treated me, for the things you've said and done." Her face fell, and then, as if on cue, tears welled up in her eyes. "Mom, please, I'm sorry. Can we just forget all that? I want to be here with you." It was hard, looking into her eyes and seeing the plea there. But the tears seemed more a tactic than true remorse. Lily, I love you, but you can't stay here just because it's convenient or because you're escaping from something unpleasant. You need to want to be here for the right reasons, and you need to make amends, truly. She wiped her face, the tears stopping as quickly as they had come. Fine. If you don't want me here, I'll just go. The months that followed were a testament to my resolve. I heard from Sarah that Mark had started drinking, unable to cope with his bruised ego and the life he had dismantled by his own hands. Lily moved to another city, perhaps in search of the fresh start she had tried to find with me. Meanwhile, my career reached new heights. Life was good, stable, and fulfilling professionally. But it was the personal victory that sweetened the newfound success. I met Tom at a conference. His kindness and understanding were a balm to the scars left by my first marriage. We connected over shared interests, and soon, friendship blossomed into love. We married quietly, a simple ceremony with a few close friends. As I stood there, exchanging vows with Tom, I realized I had found my peace. The past was behind me, and the future was a promise I was ready to keep. I guess you could say I lived a straightforward life, working for my dad's company. He built it from scratch, and it's one of those big, bustling trading firms downtown. I stuck to my job, didn't really date much. Most evenings were simple, me and Jess, my best friend since high school, hanging out. Jess? She's a whirlwind, always with a new guy on her arm. I lost count a long time ago. One Monday morning, Dad called me into his office, a rare occurrence since he liked us to handle our own corners of the business. Nellie, I want you to meet someone. This is Tom. He gestured to a man standing beside him, looking all sharp in a business suit. Tom's joining us from the West Branch. Thought you might show him the ropes. Tom stepped forward, sticking his hand out. Nice to meet you, Nellie. Heard a lot of good things. His grip was firm, his smile a bit too polished. Likewise, I replied, trying not to sound too uninterested. I was used to new faces around, but there was something about Tom that didn't sit right. Maybe it was his too smooth demeanor. As weeks turned into months, Tom and I worked closely, and his relentless charm started to chip away at my initial reservations. He'd drop by my office with a coffee just how I like it, black, no sugar, or he'd offer a casual, "Need a hand with that?" whenever I was buried under reports. Then there were the lunches. It began as group things, but somehow we'd end up splitting from the crowd, just the two of us. I wasn't sure when the shift happened, when my thoughts about him started to warm, but they did. Jess, of course, was less than thrilled. We were at her place, a cozy, cluttered apartment she never seemed to stay in long enough to clean. "You're spending a lot of time with the new guy," she noted, eyebrow raised as she sipped her wine. "Yeah, so? He's nice. Nicer than I thought," I defended, feeling a strange need to protect my budding feelings from her scrutiny. "Nice," she mimicked, making it sound like the dirtiest word in the world. "Just be careful, Nell. Guys like that, they know how to make a girl feel special, then bam, they're on to the next conquest." But I didn't listen, not really. It felt too good to have someone see me, really see me, even if it was through what Jess called charm-tinted glasses. It wasn't long before Tom asked me out properly. No work excuses, no accidental meetings. Just a straightforward, "Would you like to have dinner with me?" I said yes. I didn't think much about where it might lead. The day I said yes to Tom wasn't like in the movies. There were no fireworks, no dramatic music swelling in the background. Just a quiet yes at the little Italian place we'd made our spot. He looked like he won the lottery, and honestly, so did I. In the blur that followed, wedding planning took over. My mom, bless her heart, was all over it like white on rice, bustling around with more energy than I'd seen in years. "Nellie, darling, do you like these flowers? What about this color for the bridesmaids?" It was endless. Tom leaned back in his chair during one of the planning sessions, his eyes scanning over the catering menu. Babe, as long as they have those little shrimp things you love, and maybe some steak, I'm good. Mom shot him a look, her hands on her hips. Thomas, it's not just about the food. We have to think about the venue, the guest list. Speaking of which, how many are you bringing? Oh, just a few folks. My sister, her kids, a couple of buddies from work, Tom replied, trying to sound casual, but I caught the slight tension in his voice when he mentioned his sister. His sister, Sarah, was a single mom with twins. I hadn't met her until the wedding day, and she was as frazzled as any solo parent with two hyper 3-year-olds would be. She was nice, though, kept apologizing for the kids running around like pint-sized tornadoes. Jess, ever the firecracker, was instantly by my side when she saw me stressing over the details. Nell, chill. It's going to be perfect. You worry too much. I laughed, nudging her with my elbow. Easy for you to say. You just have to show up and look pretty. The wedding itself was a blur of faces, music, and dancing. I remember looking out at all the people who'd come to celebrate with us, feeling like I was in some kind of dream. Tom was right there, always within reach, his hand finding mine, his smiles just for me. After the honeymoon, which was a week of beachside bliss, reality kicked back in. We moved into the house my parents gifted us, a cozy, 2-story place with a garden that needed some love. It was ours, though, and that felt huge. One evening, after most of the boxes were unpacked, we collapsed on the sofa, a mess of takeout containers between us. We really did it, huh? Tom said, a goofy grin on his face as he threw an arm around me. We did, I agreed, leaning into him. Feels like playing house, doesn't it? Best kind of play, he chuckled, kissing the top of my head. You're okay with this, right? Me working and you. I knew what he was asking. We'd talked about it before, the idea of me being a housewife. It wasn't something I ever thought I'd want, but with Tom, it seemed right. Yeah, I'm good with it. I want to make this a real home, you know? Yeah, I know. He squeezed my shoulder. And hey, maybe soon we'll be adding a little more noise around here, huh? I smiled at that, the thought of kids running around, filling the house with even more life. Yeah, maybe. We sat there for a while, just enjoying each other's company, the quiet hum of our new life surrounding us. It felt right, like we were exactly where we were supposed to be. Months turned into years, and that little hope of adding the sound of tiny feet running around the house started to wear me down. Every month was a cycle of hope and disappointment. It wasn't supposed to be this hard, was it? People have kids every day. Why was it different for us? I remember sitting in the doctor's office, feeling like I was about to get my report card. The room smelled like antiseptic and something floral that was probably meant to calm nerves, but just made me more anxious. Well, Nellie, the doctor started, looking over her glasses at me after checking all the test results. Everything seems normal. These things sometimes take time. Just keep trying, and try not to worry. Tom was trying to be supportive, but I could tell it was getting to him too. One night over dinner, he reached across the table, taking my hand. Hey, we're in this together, okay? We're a team, right? Right, I agreed, but part of me wondered if I was letting him down. Jess was a whirlwind of support and blunt pep talks. You're stressing too much. It's like trying to catch a butterfly with a net. Just chill. I rolled my eyes, though her words did ease the tension a bit. Easy for you to say. You're not the one going through it. She waved a dismissive hand. True, but I see you, all wound up all the time. It's not gonna help you get pregnant. The conversation shifted when Jess dropped her own bombshell a few weeks later. We were at a cafe, the smell of coffee strong in the air. She had that look, like she was sitting on a secret. Finally, she blurted it out, her eyes gleaming. I'm pregnant. For a moment, everything stopped. The cafe noise faded into the background, and I felt a mix of joy and an inexplicable sting. Jess, that's amazing. I managed, my voice brighter than I felt. Yeah, it's kinda crazy, right? I mean, I wasn't even trying, she added, then winced, realizing how her words might sound to me. Who's the dad? I asked, genuinely curious, despite the ache in my chest. She shrugged, her expression unreadable. Just some guy. You don't know him. Anyway, we're not together or anything. It's just me and this little bean. I nodded, the news settling in. I was happy for her, really. But it was a stark reminder of what I didn't have. As we talked more, her excitement infectious, I felt my own worries slip away, replaced by something like hope. Maybe not all paths were straight. Maybe some had detours that still led to beautiful places. The months after Jess had her baby boy were a whirl of emotions. I visited her as soon as she was settled back home, carrying the plush, overpriced baby blanket I'd picked out, something soft enough for royalty. Jess seemed overwhelmed but happy, a tired smile permanently etched on her face. God, Nellie, it's insane. I barely have time to shower, let alone host visits, she confessed as we sat on her cluttered couch, her new baby cradled in her arms. I totally get it, I reassured her, trying not to feel sidelined. Just know I'm here, whenever you need a break or just want to scream into a pillow. Back at home, things were different. Tom's weekend trips to help his sister, Sarah, with her twins, became more frequent. Every time he packed up for another visit, I offered to come along. Let me help, it'll be fun. The kids are great, I'd suggest, trying to sound cheerful. Nah, you don't need to deal with all that chaos. I got it, he'd insist, shutting down the conversation before it could grow. Sarah's going through a lot. I just want to be there for her, you know? So, I stayed back, filled the silence of our home with new projects. I bought gifts for the twins, soft toys, and books, things I hoped would make their days brighter. Give these to the kids, I'd tell Tom, handing over the brightly wrapped packages. Sure thing, babe. They'll love this, he'd say, packing them away in his overnight bag. One Saturday, with Tom away supposedly buried in kid duty, I headed to the mall to pick up some new tablecloths and napkins for our home. Something to brighten up the place. As I walked through the aisles, picking through patterns and fabrics, a familiar laugh caught my attention. There, in the middle of the mall, was Sarah, her twins tugging at each corner of her purse, none the worse for wear. Surprised, I approached them, my heart starting to race for reasons I couldn't pin down. Sarah, what a surprise! I exclaimed, perhaps a little too loudly. Nellie, oh my goodness, it's so good to see you. Sarah beamed, herding her kids closer. We're just picking up some school supplies. We decided to grab coffee at a small cafe inside the mall. As we settled down, the kids distracted with some coloring books, I ventured cautiously. So, Tom's been a big help on the weekends, huh? Sarah's face clouded with confusion. Tom? Oh, he hasn't been over in months. Things have been crazy, and he's busy, you know. We mostly just text. Her words hit me like a slap. Oh, but he's there now, right? Helping out? My voice was thin, hopeful. No, haven't seen him. Is everything okay, Nellie? Sarah's concern was genuine, but it only twisted the knife deeper. I nodded, pasting on a smile. Yeah, all good. Must have misunderstood his plans. We chatted a bit longer, but I barely heard her. My mind was racing, piecing together the lies. He wasn't with his sister. He hadn't been for a long time. Where was he? What was he doing? The drive home was a blur. I kept telling myself to breathe, to not let panic take over. But inside, my world was crumbling. The trust I'd had, the life we'd built, it all felt like a house of cards, ready to topple at the slightest touch. The house was too quiet, the silence echoing off the walls like a bad omen. I needed answers. I needed to know if my instincts, now screaming betrayal, were right. Tom's office was at the end of the hallway, a space where he spent his evenings working, or so he said. I walked over to his desk, my hands slightly trembling as I contemplated where to start looking. His laptop sat there, closed but not asleep, its power light pulsing softly. I opened the laptop, hesitating for a moment before I typed in the password. He'd told me once, carelessly, not thinking I'd ever have a reason to use it. The screen lit up, revealing his cluttered desktop filled with folders and documents. I didn't know what I was looking for exactly. Maybe a receipt, an email, anything that could explain the sinking feeling in my gut. I clicked through folders, finding nothing but work files and boring reports. My hope was dwindling, replaced by frustration and a growing sense of foolishness. Maybe I was overreacting. But then, I noticed a folder tucked away at the bottom of the screen, labeled simply Miscellaneous. It was a strange place for such a folder, hidden among spreadsheets and business plans. Curiosity piqued, I opened it. There were photos. My breath caught as I clicked on the first image. It was Tom, and there, far too close, was Jess. A passionate, intimate kiss that you don't share with just anyone. And in another, he was holding her baby, looking down at him with a tenderness he'd never shown even in our talks of having our own. I felt cold, frozen in place as the truth settled in. My husband was cheating on me. With Jess. The world seemed to tilt, a vertigo of betrayal spinning me around. I needed to hear his voice, needed to know what he'd say. Shaking, I grabbed my phone and dialed his number. He picked up almost immediately. "Hey, babe." Tom's voice was casual, too casual. "What's up? Where are you?" I managed to say, my voice steady, despite the turmoil inside. "Oh, just at Sarah's. Helping her with the kids. You know how it is," he replied smoothly. A child's scream cut through the background, lending credence to his lie. The rest of the weekend passed in a blur. When Tom came home, he was the picture of a loving husband, oblivious to the storm raging inside me. I acted the part of the none the wiser wife, but inside, I was reeling, planning, thinking of my next steps. By Monday, I had made up my mind. I called a private detective, a number given by a friend who had gone through something similar. We met at a coffee shop, a public place where I could keep my composure. "I need to know everything," I told him, my voice low. "Can you do that?" He nodded, his expression grave. "It'll take a couple of weeks. I'll get you everything you need to know." I went home to play the part of the trusting wife a little longer, the weight of my secret knowledge pressing down on me like a physical burden. 2 agonizing weeks of playing the doting wife finally culminated on a crisp Saturday morning. Tom had left early, his bag packed for another weekend at his sister's. I was nursing a lukewarm cup of coffee when the call came. It was the detective, his voice low and even. "I have the results," he said. "Can we meet?" "There's a cafe downtown, quiet enough for a conversation." "See you there," I said, already heading upstairs to get dressed. The drive to the cafe was a blur, my mind racing through 1,000 scenarios. What would the evidence show? Was there a chance, any chance at all, that I was wrong about Tom? Those hopes were dashed the moment the detective laid the photographs on the table between us. There was Tom and Jess, not just together, but intimate, affectionate. The detective's voice was a steady stream, but I only caught pieces, lost in the visual proof of betrayal. "And here are the invoices," he was saying, sliding another batch of papers across to me. "About $35,000 in total. All paid to cover medical expenses for the delivery. His name is on the receipts." Back home, I went straight to our bedroom. The closet was full of Tom's clothes, his scent, his presence. With a grim determination, I pulled out suitcases and began packing. Every shirt, every pair of jeans, every sock, I removed them from my life with a meticulousness that was almost surgical. Once everything was packed, I called a courier service. "I have a few items that need immediate delivery," I told them, my voice flat. The address I gave was Jess's. With his belongings gone, my next step was to secure my sanctuary. I called a locksmith and had all the locks in the house changed. No trace of Tom was left accessible, not even a way in. Feeling both emptied and resolute, I drove to my parents' house. My mother opened the door, her expression turning from surprise to concern in an instant. "Mom, I need to talk to both of you," I said as I walked in, my father appearing in the hallway behind her. In the living room, I laid everything out, the photos, the receipts, the betrayal. My father's face grew dark with each revelation, his disappointment palpable. "You need to divorce him, Nellie," he said, his voice firm. "He's not the man we thought he was." "I've already started the process," I replied, pulling out the divorce papers from my bag. I needed you to know." Mom reached out, her hand covering mine. "We're here for you, darling. Whatever you need." That evening, as the sky darkened and a quiet settled over my parents' home, my phone began to light up relentlessly. First, it was Tom, his calls coming in one after another. When I didn't answer, the buzzing switched to texts. "Babe, why is the door locked? My key won't work. What's going on?" I stared at the screen, feeling a hollow satisfaction in ignoring him. Then Jess started calling. I didn't need to pick up to know why. Confusion, betrayal, a messy mix of emotions that I no longer cared to understand. It was late when I heard the car pull up. The sound of a door slamming was followed by urgent footsteps up the driveway. Tom didn't bother to knock, he burst through the front door, his face flushed with anger and confusion. "What's this about, Nellie? Why are my things at Jess's? Why can't I get into my own house?" His voice was loud, too loud, filling the space with a palpable tension. I was sitting in the living room with my parents. I stood slowly, meeting his gaze with a calm I didn't feel. "How do you know your things are with Jess? Weren't you supposed to be at your sister's all weekend?" Tom's face went pale, his eyes darting around as if looking for an exit or an excuse. He opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Dad stood up, his presence commanding. "You've been lying, Tom. To my daughter, to all of us. I trusted you, thought of you as a son, even wanted to make you a successor to my business." Tom's eyes widened, realizing the gravity of his situation. "I can explain." "What?" "Explain how you planned to take half of what I built. How you were using my daughter." "We know everything, Tom. The detective provided recordings of your conversations with Jess. Planning your future with her, at the expense of your marriage." Tom sank to his knees, his hands clasped in front of him. "Nellie, please, I'm sorry. It meant nothing, I swear. It was just a mistake." I felt my mom's hand on my shoulder, her touch reassuring. I looked down at the man I had once loved, now just a stranger groveling on my parents' floor. Just a mistake that costs $35,000 and a betrayal? I asked, the disgust in my voice clear. "You're not sorry you did it. You're sorry you got caught." Reaching into the folder I had brought with me, I pulled out the divorce papers, holding them out to him. "Here. I want you out of my life, for good." Tom reached for the papers, his hand shaking. He stood, the fight gone from him, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Before he could leave, Dad stepped forward, his voice booming. "And you're fired, Tom. I'll have my lawyer contact you about the financial repercussions of your actions." A few days after the confrontation with Tom, I was sitting in the quiet of my new morning routine when my phone rang. The screen flashed Jess's name, and for a moment, I considered not answering. But I needed to face this part of my past too, if I was ever going to move forward. "What's this about a lawsuit, Nellie?" Jess's voice was sharp, tinged with disbelief as soon as I picked up. "Yes, I filed for financial compensation. For the betrayal," I replied, my voice steady despite the churn of emotions. "You can't be serious," she exclaimed. "Nellie, come on, can't we talk about this? You know I've always been here for you." "Here for me? Jess, you betrayed me at the deepest level. Talking isn't going to change what you did," I said, feeling a bitter edge creep into my words. As silence filled the brief gap, I heard her breathe heavily. "I always knew it," she finally hissed. "You think you're so perfect with your perfect little life. I was always in your shadow, always the second choice to every guy. You have everything, and I have nothing, Jess, feeling inferior doesn't give you the right to destroy other people's lives. I'm sorry you felt that way, but it doesn't justify what you did, I replied, my voice cold and distant now. I hung up, cutting off any further venom she might have spewed. The lawsuit went to court, and it was as messy and painful as I had anticipated. But in the end, the judge ruled in my favor. Tom and Jess were ordered to pay a significant sum in damages. It wasn't about the money, no amount could undo the betrayal, but it was about acknowledgement, about seeing some semblance of justice. Word got around, as it always does in small towns. I heard from mutual friends that Tom had indeed married Jess, but the marriage crumbled just as quickly when he discovered her child wasn't his. The irony of it all would have been laughable if it hadn't been so tragic. Tom tried to reach out once, a feeble attempt to apologize or explain, perhaps looking for some absolution I wasn't ready to give. I didn't need his explanations anymore, his actions had spoken more clearly than his words ever could. He ended up drifting from one low-paying job to another, his once promising career in shambles. As for Jess, life had become a struggle, raising her child alone without the affluent lifestyle she had tried to secure by betraying me. I sometimes wondered if she regretted her decisions, if the harsh reality of her actions had finally sunk in. Through it all, I learned about resilience. I learned that the foundations you build in your life, the people you choose to trust, and the decisions you make, both good and bad, shape the path you walk. I was rebuilding mine, with each day bringing a little more strength, a little more hope. Today was my 35th birthday. I woke up feeling the usual aches and pains that came with my chronic illness, a constant companion since childhood. As the CEO of a thriving tech startup, I usually masked my pain with work and caffeine, but not today. Today felt different, heavier somehow. I decided a trip to the private clinic was necessary, a place I'd come to view almost as a second home. I knew most of the staff by name, but it was Tom, the young nurse, who always caught my attention. Tom was charming, with a quick smile that made many of the patients blush, myself included. He was also persistent. Today, when I walked through the clinic's doors, he was the first to greet me. "Happy birthday, Elena," looking sharp as always. He grinned, his eyes lighting up as he approached me. "You know, you don't have to go through this alone. I'm here, you know." I sighed, settling onto the clinic bed. "Appreciate it, Tom, but you know my situation. It's complicated." As Tom prepared the drip, he didn't miss a beat. "I don't care about your illness, Elena. I like you. Whenever you're ready to talk about us, I'm here." As Tom busied himself with the charts, I tried to focus on the positives. I was successful, I was independent, but as much as I hated to admit it, I was lonely too. The day dragged on with the usual rounds of tests and doctor's visits. By late afternoon, I was ready to head back home, but Tom had other ideas. "Hey, birthday girl, you can't just go home and mope. Let's grab dinner, my treat. Let's celebrate you," he insisted. I hesitated. It was tempting to spend more time with him outside the sterile clinic walls. "Okay, but just as friends." "Just as friends," he agreed, but the twinkle in his eye said more. Dinner with Tom was easy and filled with laughter. He had a way of making me forget about the clinical coldness of my routine. As we talked, it wasn't just about my health or the clinic, it was about movies, travel, and food. It was normal, and for a moment, I let myself enjoy it. "Elena, you're incredible, you know that?" Tom said as he walked me to my car afterward. "Listen, I meant what I said earlier. I want to be there for you, in whatever way you let me." I looked up at him, the streetlights casting shadows across his earnest face. "Tom, it's not that simple. My life, my health, it's a lot for anyone to handle." "I'm not just anyone, Elena. I'm the guy who's asking you to take a chance on me," he replied, his voice steady and sure. I felt a rush of emotions. Here was this wonderful man, willing to accept me with all my complications. "Let's take it slow, okay?" As I drove home, his invitation replayed in my mind. Maybe, just maybe, I could let myself have this slice of happiness. After all, wasn't life too short to spend alone? 6 months flew by faster than I could have imagined. Tom and I were seeing each other regularly, and every moment spent together seemed to ease the constant discomfort of my illness. He made everything feel simpler, lighter. Yet, beneath the surface, I harbored reservations about our future given my health, but Tom never seemed to waver. One crisp Saturday evening, as the autumn leaves painted the city in hues of orange and red, Tom suggested a walk through the park after dinner. "Elena, you know I'm not much for fancy speeches, right?" Tom started, his voice a bit shaky, which was unlike him. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about how happy you make me. I want this to be a forever thing." I felt my heart skip a beat. "Tom, are you sure? You know my situation. It's not going to get any easier." "Yeah, I know, and I don't care. I want all of it, the good days, the bad days, and everything in between." He then took a small box out of his pocket and opened it to reveal a simple, yet beautiful ring. "Elena, will you marry me?" The proposal caught me off guard. I knew I loved him, but commitment at this level was something I hadn't allowed myself to consider seriously because of my health complications. Seeing him there, so sure of us, made all my defenses start to crumble. "Yes, Tom. Yes, I'll marry you." We embraced, and for a moment, the world around us seemed to disappear. It was just us, and it felt right. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of planning. We decided on a small ceremony, nothing fancy, just us and a few close friends, including his sister and her husband. But before any of that, I needed to address the practicalities of our future together. Sitting down with Tom one evening, I brought out the prenuptial agreement I had drawn up. "I want to talk about something a bit, well, practical. It's important, given my business and my health." Tom nodded. "Anything, Elena." I handed him the papers. "It's a prenup." He took the documents, scanning them briefly before looking up at me with a smile. "If that makes you feel secure, I'm okay with it. I'm not here for the money, Elena. I'm here for you." "And you're sure? You're really sure about this?" I pressed, needing to hear it just one more time. "Absolutely," he assured me, signing the document without a second thought. "Now, can we go back to planning our tiny wedding?" "Yeah, we can," I replied, feeling a mixture of relief and love. Tom's easy acceptance of the prenup reassured me of his intentions and commitment. Our wedding day was simple and perfect. The city hall ceremony was quick, and the only people present were those we loved most. Standing there, exchanging vows with Tom, I felt a surge of hope. Maybe, just maybe, life was giving me a chance to have something beautiful, despite everything. Life after our quiet little wedding was, for a while, pretty close to what I'd imagined as perfect. Tom and I settled into our new life together, and he took over running the household. It was a nice change. I'd come home to incredible smells wafting from the kitchen, and the place looked spotless. The first few months felt like we were in some sort of honeymoon phase that just kept going. But about a year in, things started to change subtly. I noticed that Tom seemed a bit off. His enthusiasm for things around the house began to wane, and he seemed more withdrawn. At first, I chalked it up to the adjustment of living together or the end of the honeymoon phase, but the shift was palpable. One day, I came home early to surprise him with news about a potential new client for my business. I walked in, expecting to find him bustling around in the kitchen or maybe sorting out the laundry. Instead, the house was quiet, too quiet. Puzzled, I walked towards the kitchen, and that's when I heard it, voice. I paused by the door, listening. A woman's voice, cheerful and unfamiliar, chatting away as if she owned the place. Pushing the door open, I saw a middle-aged woman, humming as she chopped vegetables. She looked up, startled. "Oh, you must be Elena. I'm June. Tom didn't say you'd be home this early." "June? And who exactly are you?" I managed to keep my voice steady, despite the shock. "I'm the housekeeper. Tom hired me about a year ago. I come in a few times a week to clean up and cook. Makes things easier, you know?" She smiled, clearly unaware of the bomb she'd just dropped. A housekeeper? For a year? And I had no clue? I felt a mix of anger and betrayal boiling inside me, but I kept it together. Right, I see. Thanks, June. Would you mind giving us a moment? Of course. She wiped her hands and left the room. When Tom came home, he found me sitting in the living room, still processing everything. His face fell the moment he saw my expression. Who's June, Tom? I asked bluntly. Tom hesitated, then sighed. She's the housekeeper. Look, I meant to tell you, but I thought you'd be upset about me not doing the stuff around the house myself. Upset? Tom, you think I'd be upset about who cleans or cooks? I'm upset because you lied, because you thought this was something you had to hide. My voice rose with every word. I know, and I'm sorry. It started small, and then I just didn't know how to bring it up without making it a big deal. It seemed easier to just keep it going. He tried to explain, looking genuinely remorseful. Easier for who, Tom? Because this doesn't feel easy for me. I shot back. We talked it out that night. He apologized, and I tried to understand his perspective. But something had shifted between us, a small crack that made me wonder what else he might not be telling me. Things smoothed over a bit after that, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Tom continued to be great at making dinner and keeping the house in order, but now I knew he wasn't the one actually doing all the work. It felt like our roles were clear. I worked, and he managed the home, except he didn't really manage it, he outsourced it. And yet something about Tom's behavior was off, and it wasn't just the hidden housekeeper issue. His late-night whispers on the phone, his sudden need for privacy, and his constant excuses for needing more money, it all added up to something sinister. So, I did what any self-respecting woman with my resources would do. I hired a private detective. It wasn't long before the detective came back with news, and it wasn't the kind I'd hoped for. Tom was spending most of his days at a casino, and the sums of money he was losing were staggering. I felt a mix of relief and despair, relief that there wasn't another woman, but despair at the size of his deception. That evening, when Tom came home, I was waiting for him in the living room, the detective's report in hand. He tried to kiss me hello, but I stepped back, holding up the papers. Care to explain this? I asked, my voice cold and more composed than I felt. Tom sank down onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands. I didn't mean for it to get this out of hand. It started small, just a way to blow off some steam. But it got bigger, and I didn't know how to stop. And you thought the best way to deal with it was to lie to me? To steal from me? My voice was rising now, my temper flaring. I'm sorry, Elena. I'm so sorry. I need help. I want to quit, I swear. I need your help to get out of this mess. His voice was desperate, pleading. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm inside me. I'll help you, Tom, but this is the last time. You need to get treatment for your addiction, and you're going to sign a receipt acknowledging the debt I'm paying off. It's $50,000, Tom. $50,000. Tom nodded miserably. Yes, anything you say. I'll do it. I'll get help. We arranged for him to start treatment the following week. But just when I thought we might be finding our way back to some sort of normalcy, Tom dropped another bombshell. Out of the blue, he said, Elena, I've been thinking, maybe we should have a baby. It might bring us closer. I stared at him, incredulous. A baby? Tom, you know I can't. It's not just risky, it could be fatal for me. He quickly tried to backpedal. I know. I just thought, never mind. But the idea didn't go away. It kept coming up, more and more. Even his sister, an obstetrician, called me about it. You should reconsider, Elena. Having a baby is the most natural thing. Don't be selfish. Selfish? You're a doctor. You know my condition. How can you even suggest such a thing? I was furious. She scoffed and hung up on me. The conversation left me shaken. How could they be so callous, so cruel? Months of tension and unresolved arguments had frayed my nerves, but nothing could have prepared me for the scene I walked into that fateful day. I returned home earlier than usual, my steps quickening with the anticipation of a quiet evening. Instead, I opened the door to chaos, boxes piled up, and Tom's sister, Lisa, and her husband, Mark, arranging their belongings around my living room. "What the hell is going on here?" I demanded, my voice cutting through the noise. Lisa turned to face me, an unnerving calmness to her demeanor. "Oh, we're moving in, Elena. This is Tom's place, and you should really start packing your things." My eyes flicked to Tom, searching for some sign of confusion or disagreement on his face, but there was none. Instead, he met my gaze with a look that chilled me to the bone. "Elena, I can't do this anymore. You've been manipulating and controlling me for years. It's over," Tom declared, his voice cold and distant. I stared at him, dumbfounded. "Manipulating you? Tom, what are you talking about?" "You heard him," Mark chimed in, his voice just as harsh. "He's done being your slave." Tom stepped forward, a stack of papers in hand. "Here are the divorce papers. I'm also filing for compensation for years of emotional abuse and alimony. I need to look after my well-being now." The room spun as I took the papers from his hand. This was a nightmare. I glanced through the documents, each word a betrayal. But rising panic gave way to a steely calm. I let out a laugh, short and devoid of humor. "Well, you're in for a surprise. But go on, think what you want. You'll be hearing from my lawyer." Without another word, I went to our bedroom, packed a suitcase with essentials, and prepared to leave. There was no point in arguing. The man I had married, the man I thought I knew, was gone. I drove away from the apartment and headed toward the elite cottage village where I had a house waiting, a home that was truly mine, bought long before Tom entered my life. As I passed the familiar gates and nodded to the guards, a weight lifted off my shoulders. The house was exactly as I left it, spacious, quiet, and tailored to my needs. It had always been my sanctuary, a place I had prepared for my future, knowing my health might take a turn for the worse. As night fell, I made a few phone calls, informing my closest friends of the situation and reassuring them I was okay. My lawyer was up next, ready to discuss our strategy. Tom and his outrageous claims would not go unchallenged. A few days after settling into my sanctuary, I was startled by a frantic call from Tom. His voice, laced with panic and fury, blared through the phone. "Elena, you've set me up. This is some kind of sick game to you, isn't it?" Calmly, with a small smile, I replied, "Tom, if you think there's been a misunderstanding, why don't you come over and we'll talk about it? I'll send you the address." Soon after, the village gates swung open, and Tom, alongside Lisa and her husband Mark, drove through. I watched from the window as their car pulled up, their faces pressed against the car windows, eyes wide as they took in the view of my expansive home. They approached my front door, still gaping at the luxurious setting, their previous bravado seeming to shrink a bit. As I opened the door, I couldn't help but cough to clear the silence, then offered a wry smile. "Well, what brings you to my humble abode?" Tom, regaining some of his earlier fire, blurted out, "Your lawyer called me. He said I have to pay next month's rent for the apartment, $6,000. You never told me it wasn't your apartment. You never asked about it, and if you want to live in this apartment, pay the rent," I explained with deliberate patience. Lisa, ever the opportunist, chimed in, elbowing Tom. "And what about this place? It's gorgeous." Tom nodded vigorously. "Yeah, why don't you just give us this house instead of that apartment? Otherwise, we'll sue you for everything you've got." Their audacity was almost comical. I couldn't help but burst into laughter. "You want to sue me for this house? Tom, dear, I bought this house long before you were in the picture. You have no claim over it whatsoever." Their faces turned red with frustration, and the shouting escalated. "You can't just kick us out. We have rights," Tom yelled. "That's where you're wrong," I replied, my voice firm as I picked up the phone. "Security, could you please escort these people out?" They seemed to be lost. Within minutes, the village security arrived, and the trio was promptly shown out. As they were escorted away, their indignant protests faded into the distance, leaving behind a quiet that settled over the house like a comforting blanket. After they left, I sat back down, the laughter gone, replaced by a weary sigh. It was clear that Tom and his sister were grasping at straws, trying to intimidate me into giving up what was rightfully mine. I called my lawyer again, going over the details of the day's confrontation. "We need to be prepared for whatever they might try next," I told him, my tone resolute. "Don't worry, Elena. We'll handle this. They have no legal standing," he reassured me. The day of the court hearing arrived with a tension thick enough to slice through. I walked into the courtroom, my lawyer at my side, ready to face whatever Tom and his family had concocted. The allegations were ludicrous. Tom claimed that I had exploited him, turning him into what he dramatically referred to as my slave. He recounted stories of endless chores and a thankless life under my supposed tyranny, all while his sister Lisa and her husband Mark nodded vigorously, echoing his every word. I resisted the urge to roll my eyes. Luckily, it was soon our turn to present the reality of the situation. My lawyer stood, adjusting his suit jacket with a calm assurance. "Your Honor, we have evidence that contradicts every single one of Mr. Thomas's claims," he stated confidently, then turned to call our first witness. The au pair Tom had hired, June, came forward. I worked in their home, doing all the household chores and cooking. Mr. Thomas Elliot hardly lifted a finger. She testified, her statement backed by employment records and salary slips proving Tom hardly contributed to the household work as he claimed. After June's testimony, my lawyer presented the prenuptial agreement. As per this legally binding document, signed by both parties, he continued, pointing to the signatures at the bottom of the page. It clearly states that in the event of a divorce, Mr. Elliot is entitled to nothing. No alimony, no compensation. The courtroom was silent as the weight of the document sank in. Tom's face drained of color when my lawyer added, "Mr. Elliot, did you read this document before you signed it?" Tom stuttered. "Well, I saw the part about if something happened to Elena, but you didn't read it all. Is that correct?" my lawyer pressed. "Yes, but I didn't think." "You didn't think to read what you were signing," my lawyer cut him off, turning back to the judge. "Your Honor, we also wish to present proof of Mr. Elliot gambling debts, which Mrs. Elliot generously cleared, and for which we have a signed acknowledgement from Mr. Elliot himself." I watched as Tom slumped in his seat, the reality of his situation finally hitting him. When the judge finally spoke, her voice was clear and firm. "After reviewing the evidence and hearing the testimonies, it is this court's decision to grant the divorce requested by Mrs. Elena Elliot. Furthermore, all claims for compensation and alimony by Mr. Thomas Elliot are denied." As we walked out of the courtroom, a sense of profound relief washed over me. But that relief was quickly overshadowed by the spectacle outside the courtroom. Lisa was furiously berating Tom, her words sharp and unforgiving. "You fool. All you had to do was get her pregnant and died, then we could have had everything. You couldn't even do that right." I stopped for a moment to take in the scene, the reality of their treachery settling in deeper. They hadn't just wanted money, they had hoped for my demise. Months had passed since the courtroom drama had unfolded, and I had slowly begun to reclaim my peace, focusing on my health and my business. One crisp morning, as I sipped my coffee and reviewed some business reports, the serenity was abruptly disrupted by an unexpected visitor. I glanced at the security monitor and saw Tom, looking disheveled and desperate, at the gates of my village. I instructed the guards to let him in, curious yet cautious about his sudden appearance. As he approached the front door, I could see the strain in his face, the weight of his recent hardships etched into his features. He fell to his knees as soon as I opened the door, an act so dramatic it almost seemed rehearsed. "Elena, please, I'm begging you, take me back. I'll do anything. I'll cook, clean, anything you want. Just let me stay here," he pleaded, his voice breaking. I stared down at him, my expression calm yet firm. "Tom, after everything, why would you think I'd ever consider such a thing?" "It wasn't all my idea, Elena," It was Lisa's plan to push for the baby, too, to end things that way. I never wanted any of it to happen. I swear, I was just caught up in it. He blurted out, desperation seeping through his every word. I took a deep breath, keeping my composure. Tom, what you're failing to understand is that it's not just about what happened, or who planned what. It's about trust. And you broke that beyond repair. You didn't just follow Lisa's plans, you stood by her knowing full well how dangerous her schemes were for me. He scrambled to his feet, reaching out as if he could physically pull back the relationship we once had. Elena, I'm lost without you. I've taken out a loan to pay back the $50,000, and I've started working again. I'm trying to fix my mistakes. Fixing your mistakes doesn't mean you get to rewind and erase the consequences, I replied sharply. What you need to understand, Tom, is that you chose this path. Now you must walk it alone. His face crumpled, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for him, almost. But then I remembered the cold, calculating discussions about my health and potential demise. I want you to leave. Now, I said, my voice unwavering. And Tom, don't come back. You are not welcome here, not now, not ever. When he hesitated, still trying to muster another plea, I turned and signaled to the security personnel who had discreetly remained close by. They stepped forward, escorting him away as he called out my name, his cries fading into the distance. After he was gone, I stood at the doorway for a few moments, letting the silence wash over me again. This house, this life, I had built it, and I would not let anyone disrupt it again. I returned to my morning routine, the disturbance now settling into a resolved chapter of my life. Looking ahead, my thoughts turned to future plans, the dreams of travel and meeting new people. The world was wide, and my heart, once burdened by betrayal, now felt lighter with possibilities. My name's Gina. I'm 38 and I live and breathe the world of wedding dresses, running my own atelier salon here in the city. It's a good life, honestly. My husband, Alex, works as an architect, and we've got 2 kids, Sam and Olivia, both in grade school. They're a handful, but in the best way possible. But family? Now that's where it gets messy. You see, my in-laws are a mixed bag. I get along great with Alex's parents and his younger brother, Mike. But Carol, Alex's older sister, is another story. She's 42, been married 3 times, and she is in constant search of a 4th victim. If there were a way to handle her that didn't involve weekly headaches, I'd have found it by now. Let me paint you a picture of a typical family dinner, which will give you a taste of what I deal with. At my in-laws' house, a cozy, well-lit dining room buzzing with chatter. Alex's mom, sweet as ever, is bustling around, setting dishes on the table. Mike and his wife, Jane, are helping with the kids, keeping them entertained. Then there's Carol, draped dramatically on a chair, red wine in hand, voice loud enough to drown out the rest. Carol, waving her glass, says, "So, Gina, still playing dress up with those brides? When are you going to design something real, like haute couture or something?" I bite my tongue, focusing on dishing out some mashed potatoes. I've learned that engaging with Carol only fuels her fire. Mike chimes in, trying to change the subject. "Hey, Carol, heard you're planning another wedding. What's the lucky guy like?" Carol smirks. "Oh, you know, successful, rich, what you'd expect. Not that you'd understand, little brother." Jane shoots me a sympathetic look. She's been in the trenches with me when it comes to handling Carol. We share an eye roll. The dinner progresses with the usual banter, some of it good-natured, some of it barbed, especially from Carol. She's got a knack for steering conversations back to her favorite subject, herself. Alex, catching my eye, gives me an encouraging nod. We're a team, after all, and dealing with Carol is just one of those family hurdles we navigate together. The evening wraps up with promises to meet again next month. I hug my mother-in-law goodbye, feeling the solidarity in her tight squeeze. Driving home, Alex reaches over to squeeze my hand. "You okay?" "Yeah," I sigh, watching the city lights blur past. Just another day in the life, right? Right, Alex agrees, a smile in his voice. But hey, we've got each other, and that's what counts. And he's right. Despite the Carol-induced drama, we have a solid little world of our own, and nothing, not even a sister-in-law with a penchant for theatrics, can take that away from us. One typical Thursday morning found me knee-deep in tulle and satin, sketching out a new design that had popped into my head overnight. The atelier was quiet, save for the soft hum of the sewing machine from the corner where my assistant, Lisa, was working on a rush order. That's when my phone buzzed, a call from Jane, my brother-in-law Mike's wife. "Hey Gina, guess what? You will not believe what I just heard." Jane's voice crackled with mischief over the phone. I leaned back in my chair, ready for a bit of gossip to break up the morning monotony. "Hit me. What's the latest?" "So, Carol's getting married again. Fourth time's the charm, right?" Jane laughed, and I couldn't help but chuckle along. "Seriously? Again? What is it this time? Did she find another millionaire looking for a trophy wife?" I asked, half joking. "Bingo! Some real estate mogul from out of town. She's planning the wedding of the century. Again. You're probably going to get the SOS for a dress soon, so brace yourself," Jane warned. I sighed, picturing the impending headache. "Well, thanks for the heads up. I guess I should start stocking up on aspirin and patience." Just then, Lisa piped up from her sewing station, having overheard parts of the conversation. Not Carol again. Her last dress was a nightmare to adjust. Remember how she kept changing her mind about the lace? "Yeah, I remember," I replied, rubbing my temples just thinking about it. "Well, let's just hope she finds another designer this time around." But fate, and Carol, had other plans. No sooner had I hung up with Jane than the front bell of the atelier tinkled, announcing a visitor. Speak of the devil, and she shall appear. Carol, draped in a designer scarf and oversized sunglasses, strutted into my shop like she owned the place. Her mother, Helen, followed behind, her expression apologetic. "Gina, darling, I need your magic hands again. We have a wedding to plan," Carol announced loudly, removing her sunglasses and looking around the atelier with barely concealed disdain. I forced a smile, masking my reluctance. "Carol, congratulations on the engagement. But are you sure you want to go through the dressmaking process with me again? It was quite a ride last time." "Oh, come on, who else in this town can handle my exquisite taste? Plus, you owe me a favor for not completely ruining the last dress," Carol quipped, her laugh sharp and short. Helen gave me a pleading look. "Gina, dear, I know Carol can be a bit much, but we would really appreciate your help. You know, family." "Yeah, family," I echoed, the word tasting sour in my mouth. "All right, Carol. Let's see what we can do. But this time, we're doing things my way. Agreed?" Carol pursed her lips, clearly not pleased with the conditions, but nodded anyway. "Fine, but I have specific ideas this time. It needs to be spectacular. More spectacular than the last three." As they left, I turned to Lisa, who was smirking. "What did I do to deserve this?" Lisa shrugged, her eyes twinkling with sympathy. "Who knows? But hey, if anyone can handle Carol's craziness, it's you." The rest of the day passed in a blur of fabric and sketches, but Carol's impending fourth wedding, and the gown that would surely be a thorn in my side, loomed large in my thoughts. The following week, true to her word, Carol stormed into my atelier with a thick folder under her arm and a fiery determination in her eyes. Her mom, Helen, tagged along, her smile tight, like she was bracing herself for the hurricane that was her daughter. "All right, Gina, I've been all over Pinterest and Instagram. I know exactly what I want this time. It's going to be bold, beautiful, and a bit scandalous," Carol declared, slamming the folder onto my work table and flipping it open to reveal a collection of the most over-the-top wedding dress designs I'd ever seen. I took a deep breath, skimming through her pics. "Carol, these designs, they're quite youthful. Are you sure this is the route you want to go down? What's that supposed to mean, Gina?" You think I can't pull off these styles? Is that it? Carol snapped, her voice sharp. No, it's not that. It's just that these are very revealing. Maybe we could adapt some elements to make it more you, I suggested, trying to keep the peace and steer her towards something more flattering. Carol waved off my concerns. I know what I want, Gina. And I want this. A dress that'll make everyone's jaw drop. So, can you do it or what? Resigned, I nodded, pulling out my sketch pad. Okay, let's fine-tune the ideas a bit. How about we start with the silhouette? Something that complements your figure? As I started sketching, Carol peered over my shoulder, her critique as subtle as a sledgehammer. No, that's too modest. I want it low-cut, and maybe some high slits. Think sexy, Gina, think well. And don't forget, I want it white, pure white. I paused, pencil midair. White, again? Carol, you've worn white at your last 3 weddings. Maybe we could try something new? Like a soft peach or even a bold red? Carol slammed her hand down on the table. White, Gina. I'm not some second-rate bride. I want white, the whitest white you've got. And throw in some crystals and pearls. Lots of them. The fitting sessions that followed were no less dramatic. Each time Carol visited, she demanded changes. More beads here, fewer stitches there. Make it more fabulous, Gina. It's not hitting the spectacular mark yet. And each request was delivered with a please that sounded more like a command. One afternoon, after a particularly grueling session where Carol had decided the neckline wasn't deep enough for the 3rd time, I vented to Lisa, who'd been through every step of the ordeal with me. Lisa, if I have to redraw that neckline one more time, I might just turn that dress into a curtain. Lisa chuckled, handing me a cup of tea. Hang in there, boss. It's almost over. And hey, at least it'll be a wedding no one will forget, especially with Carol wearing one of your creations. As I went back to my sketches, adjusting yet another frill, I braced myself for the next fitting. Carol's wedding was fast approaching, and I had a feeling the real drama was yet to unfold. Today was crucial. I had finally completed the cost breakdown for her elaborate wedding dress, and it was time to discuss the numbers. Carol swept into the atelier with her usual flair, trailing a scent of expensive perfume that lingered long after she passed by. Her mother, Helen, followed, wearing an expression that suggested she'd rather be anywhere else. All right, Gina, let's see if you've outdone yourself this time, Carol announced, barely glancing at the sketches and fabric samples laid out for her approval. I took a deep breath and handed her the itemized invoice. Here's the breakdown, Carol. Given the materials and labor, the total comes to $2,500. I've already applied a 30% family discount. Carol's eyes widened as she scanned the document. She slammed it down on the table, causing a spool of thread to roll off and clatter to the floor. Listen, Gina, I'm marrying a top businessman. There will be loads of rich, influential guests at my wedding. Think of this as a prime advertising opportunity for you. You should be paying me for wearing your dress. I stared at her, dumbfounded. Paying you? Carol, I'm already cutting the costs significantly. I can't afford to hand out free dresses, even for family. Helen interjected, trying to smooth things over. Carol, honey, Gina's been more than fair. Let's not. Carol cut her off, her voice rising. No, Mom. This is ridiculous. I'm doing her a favor. She should be grateful. The tension in the room was palpable. I crossed my arms, meeting her glare. Carol, I respect your position, but my business isn't a hobby. I have staff to pay and overheads to meet. I can't give away products for free, exposure or not. Carol's face turned a shade of crimson. Then you can forget it. I'll find someone else who actually values good publicity. As she stormed out, Helen lingered, her eyes apologetic. I'm so sorry, Gina. I'll talk to her. I sighed, feeling a mix of frustration and relief as Helen followed her daughter out. The rest of the day was a blur of minor tasks, my mind replaying the confrontation over and over. I was still reeling when I got home and recounted everything to Alex. Alex was livid. "She can't exploit your hard work like that, Gina. It's not fair to you or your employees." Later that evening, just as Alex and I were about to turn in, my phone rang. It was Helen. Her voice was soft, tinged with weariness. "Gina, I've been thinking about this afternoon. Carol's being unreasonable, but could we still make it work? Maybe as a wedding gift? It would mean a lot." The request caught me off guard. After a moment's hesitation, I found myself agreeing, despite the day's drama. "All right, Helen. I'll do it. The dress will be my gift to Carol." Working on Carol's wedding dress had turned my atelier into a battleground of frills and demands. Each fitting with Carol was more exhausting than the last. My staff, tired of her antics, had taken to timing their breaks to escape her visits. Lisa, my lead assistant, whispered to me as she grabbed her purse, "We're heading out for a bit. Text us when the coast is clear." As they left, Carol rolled her eyes. "They're so sensitive. You'd think they'd be used to a little criticism in this business." Trying to keep the peace, I continued pinning the dress, while Carol ranted about the upcoming lavish ceremony. The tension was palpable, and I was mentally counting down the minutes until she would leave. A week before the wedding, my phone buzzed. It was Paula, a close friend and also a friend to Carol. "Hey, are you excited about the wedding? I saw the guest list. It's going to be quite the event." I paused, a needle held midair. "The guest list? I haven't actually seen it. But yeah, I guess it'll be interesting. Paula, can you do me a favor and send me the list? Just curious about who's attending." "Sure thing, I'll email it to you now," she replied before hanging up. When the email pinged through, I scrolled through the names, my confusion turning to disbelief. My name was nowhere on it. I wasn't invited. The realization stung more than I expected. Later that evening, I brought it up with Alex. His brow furrowed as he listened. "She didn't invite you? After all the work you've put into this?" "Apparently not," I muttered, feeling a mix of anger and humiliation. Together, we called Carol, hoping it was a misunderstanding. But the conversation quickly spiraled. "Carol, we noticed Gina isn't on the guest list. There's been a mistake, right?" Alex asked, his voice tense. Carol's laughter crackled through the speaker. "No mistake. Gina's just the seamstress, why would she be at the wedding? It's for important people." I felt my heart rate pick up, my grip on the phone tightening. "But I'm making your dress. As a gift, Carol." More laughter. "Yeah, thanks for the dress. But let's not pretend you belong at my wedding, Gina. Just stay home." Alex exploded. "How can you be so ungrateful? She's your family." The call ended with Carol hanging up on us, and Alex was livid, pacing the room as he ranted about his sister's cruelty. I sat there, the weight of the entire situation sinking in. The dress I'd poured weeks into, the stress I'd endured, all for a woman who couldn't even respect me enough to acknowledge my presence at her wedding. It was a slap in the face, a betrayal that cut deeper than any harsh words she'd ever said. The final fitting was just a week away, and as Carol strutted into the atelier, you'd think nothing had happened. She was all smiles and demands, acting like she hadn't just snubbed me from the biggest day of her life. As we adjusted the fit, I kept up the charade, acting as though her snub hadn't hurt me. Inside, though, I was churning. I had decided on a plan of subtle revenge, something to give me a small sense of justice without causing a spectacle. "Oh, and I'll need to do one last thing to the dress at my workshop," I mentioned casually as I helped her out of the gown. "I'll bring it to your place on the morning of the wedding." Carol, always in a rush, barely nodded. "Just make sure it's early." "I have a tight schedule, and I don't need any delays, Gina." "Understood," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "You won't have any issues." The morning of the wedding arrived, and with the beautifully packaged dress in hand, Alex and I drove to Carol's house. My heart was pounding, not from nervousness about the wedding but from anticipation of her discovering my little surprise. We were greeted coldly by Carol at the door. She snatched the dress box from my hands without so much as a thank you. "Alex, you can stay. Gina, you should leave now. We wouldn't want to upset the important guests," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. I kept my smile, not letting her see how deep her words cut. "Of course, Carol. Have a wonderful day." Alex looked at her, anger flaring in his eyes, but he squeezed my hand and chose to leave with me. As we walked back to the car, I felt his support bolstering me. Meanwhile, Mike and his wife Jane, who were supposed to attend the wedding, had been standing nearby and overheard how Carol treated us. Outraged, they decided then and there to skip the ceremony. Mike came over to our car before we could drive away. "I can't believe she did that to you, Gina. We're not staying either. It's one thing to be a bridezilla, but it's another to be cruel," Mike said, clearly upset. As we made light of the situation, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Paula, who had stayed at the wedding. "Something's going on. Carol looks furious. Did you do something?" the text read. I couldn't help but smirk. "Nothing much. Just gave her a little wedding gift." Alex and I had just settled down with our morning coffee, the house finally quiet, when a sharp ring of the doorbell shattered the calm. We exchanged weary looks. Something in the air told us the day wasn't over just yet. I opened the door to find Carol standing there, red-faced and seething, clutching a simple piece of cloth. Her mother, Helen, stood beside her, a mix of embarrassment and frustration on her face, and Carol's fiancé, a tall, stern-looking man, hovered in the background, his expression grim. "What is this, Gina?" Carol thrust the cloth at me as if it were evidence in a trial. "Explain this now." I took a deep breath, my resolve firm. "That's your wedding dress, Carol. With your arrogance and the way you've treated everyone, that piece of cloth is more than generous." Her face twisted with fury. Carol stepped closer, her hand raised as if to strike. "You've ruined my wedding. I should." Helen caught her daughter's arm midair, holding it tightly. "Carol, stop this right now. Violence isn't going to solve anything." The fiancé finally spoke, his voice cold and decisive. "I can't do this, Carol. You're crazy, your tantrum made that clear. The wedding is cancelled." He turned, starting to walk away. "No, please don't leave." Carol's voice cracked, a mix of anger and desperation, but he didn't stop, didn't even look back as he walked down the driveway and disappeared around the corner. Carol, left standing with just her mother, turned her wrath back to me. "Look what you've done. You're happy now? You ruined everything." Before I could respond, she spun on her heel and stormed off, her mother hurrying after her, casting an apologetic look back at us. Closing the door, I leaned against it, feeling Alex's hand on my shoulder. "Are you okay?" he asked. "Yeah, just shaken," I admitted, and we moved back to the living room, trying to process the rapid unraveling of the evening. It wasn't long before my phone rang. I answered to hear Jane on the other end, her voice urgent. "Gina, you won't believe it. Carol's refusing to pay the wedding organizers now, and it's turned into a huge mess. They've called the police." My heart sank. Oh no, that sounds awful. Did they really have to call the police? Yes, she was causing a scene, screaming at them, demanding her money back since the wedding didn't go through. "It escalated quickly," Jane explained. As I hung up, I sat down heavily, the guilt gnawing at me. "Maybe I went too far, Alex. This all feels like it's spiraling out of control." Alex sat beside me, taking my hand. "You stood up for yourself, Gina. Carol's behavior has been out of line from the start. This is on her, not you." Despite his words, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy for Carol. She was family, after all, difficult as she was. After the tumult of Carol's would-be wedding day, life slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy, but the dynamics within our family had undeniably shifted. Alex and I had stopped all communication with Carol. The fallout was more than just a cancelled wedding. It had opened our eyes to deeper, more systemic issues within our family that had been ignored for too long. One quiet Sunday morning, Helen came over for coffee. The atmosphere was tense as she walked in, but her first words broke the ice. I wanted to say, "I'm not upset with you, Gina. If anything, I'm to blame for how Carol turned out. I've always given in to her, ever since she was little. It's hard to admit, but I've spoiled her." I poured her a cup of coffee, and we sat at the kitchen table, a light breeze fluttering the curtains. "Helen, you can't blame yourself for Carol's choices. She's an adult, and at some point, she has to take responsibility for her actions." Helen sipped her coffee, her eyes sad. "You're right, Gina. It's just hard, you know? She's my daughter, and I hate seeing her make these mistakes." I reached over and squeezed her hand. "I know, and it's clear how much you love her. But enabling her hasn't helped. Maybe now she'll realize she needs to change." The conversation shifted as Helen updated us on the latest rumors swirling around Carol. Apparently, she had racked up considerable debts, banking on a lavish wedding to a wealthy groom to solidify her financial and social standing. Now, with the groom out of the picture and the wedding cancelled, she was reportedly hiding from creditors. "It's a mess," Helen confessed, shaking her head. "She's staying low, trying to figure things out. I just don't know what she's planning to do about all the money she owes." Alex, who had been listening quietly, finally spoke up. "Mom, it's a tough situation, but maybe facing these consequences will be good for her in the long run. She might learn to stand on her own, stop relying on others to bail her out." Our discussion was deep, filled with a mix of regret and hope. It was clear Helen felt torn between her love for her daughter and her frustration at Carol's actions. Before Helen left, she hugged me tightly. "Thank you, Gina, for being honest and for handling everything with so much grace. I'm sorry it came to this." I hugged her back, reassuring her. "It's okay, Helen. We're family, and we'll get through this. Maybe not today or tomorrow, but we'll find a way to mend things." After Helen left, Alex and I spent the rest of the day in a reflective silence. The events with Carol had left a mark, reminding us of the complexities of family relationships and the sometimes painful growth that comes from facing hard truths. Life as a marketer was a relentless race, but I was good at it, really good. My name's Lucy, and by the time I hit 33, I had nailed down almost everything I'd set my sights on, including buying my own place. Only a couple of payments left and the apartment would officially be mine. No time for slowing down, though, not even for romance. That is, until I bumped into Jack. Jack was one of those rare guys who seemed to have popped right out of some dreamy fiction, where chivalry wasn't dead. We met at a local coffee shop, both of us reaching for the last blueberry muffin. He let me have it, but not without securing my number as a trade-off. Smart guy. From then on, it was like a fast-forward montage from a movie. Dates flowed into weekends away, and gifts started appearing on my doorstep, nothing extravagant, but always thoughtful. He had this knack for remembering things I mentioned in passing, my favorite author, that I loved tulips over roses, or how I preferred my coffee. It wasn't long before I was head over heels. And his attachment to his mom? I admired it. He'd call her every day, made sure she had everything she needed. "She's my queen," he'd say, and I saw it as a sign of his loyalty and love. A guy who treated his mom like royalty was bound to treat his wife like a queen, right? Then came the proposal. It was nothing fancy, just us, in our favorite little park. The ring was perfect, simple and elegant, just like I always wanted. I said yes, without skipping a beat. But when we started talking about where we'd live, that's when things got a bit sticky. His mom, Maggie, sweet as she was in her own way, had her own ideas. She wanted us to move in with her. Jack broached the topic gently one evening, while we were cleaning up after dinner in my apartment. "Lucy, babe, Mom suggested we move in with her. Saves money, and she'd love the company," he said, drying a plate and not quite meeting my eyes. I put down the dish I was washing, water still running. "Jack, I love your mom, you know I do. But babe, we need our own space. Just us." He looked conflicted but nodded. I get it, I really do. It's just, Mom's alone a lot, you know? I turned off the water and leaned against the counter. What if we find a place nearby? That way, we're close, but not too close. She can have us over anytime she wants, but we keep our privacy too. How does that sound? Jack's face brightened. Yeah, that could work. I'll talk to her about it. And so, we compromised. We found a rental not 10 minutes from Maggie's place. It seemed ideal. I figured over time, as we settled into married life, Jack's attachment might shift more towards our little unit. With that in mind, I rented out my apartment and started stashing away the extra income. The move was smoother than I expected. Jack was happy because his mom was just a stone's throw away, and I was relieved to maintain some independence. We fell into a comfortable routine, Jack and I commuting to work together most days, coming home to our little sanctuary. But as weeks turned into months, I couldn't shake the feeling that the ties that bound Jack to his mom weren't loosening. Every decision, big or small, seemed to need her stamp of approval. I found myself wondering if our compromise was truly that, or just a temporary fix to a permanent issue. Life was bustling as usual, my marketing job keeping me on my toes during the day, and the new marital home chores waiting each evening. Things took a sharp turn when Maggie fell sick. It wasn't anything life-threatening, thank goodness, but enough to knock the strength out of her. Lucy, can you check on Mom after work? She's really not feeling well, Jack asked one morning as we were rushing out the door, his face lined with worry. Of course, I'll swing by and see what she needs, I replied, squeezing his hand. Little did I know, this would become my new routine. Each evening, I'd go straight from the office to Maggie's. She had a specific way she liked things done, especially when it came to her meals. I can't eat that reheated stuff, it messes with my stomach, she'd complain if I ever dared suggest cooking enough to last a couple of meals. So, I found myself cooking fresh meals daily, her preferred dishes that I slowly mastered. After Maggie recovered, I thought my after-work visits would taper off. I couldn't have been more wrong. She'd grown accustomed to the company and the care. If anything, her demands increased. Lucy, dear, could you help me with the laundry? And maybe we can order some groceries online, she'd say, her voice always carrying that expectant tone. I did all that and more, picking up her orders, driving her to shops, and every beauty appointment she made. Weekends were no exception. Jack and I spent most of our Saturdays and Sundays at Maggie's, trying to make up for all the family time she missed when Jack's brother cut her off. One particularly exhausting Sunday evening, after a day filled with errands and family gatherings all centered around Maggie's needs, I collapsed on our couch, feeling more like a caretaker than a wife. Jack, we need to talk, I started, my voice heavy with fatigue. I love your mom, but I need some space, some time for us. Jack sat beside me, his expression tense. Lucy, Mom's all alone. You know what happened with my brother. I can't just abandon her. She relies on us. I knew about his brother, how he and his wife had moved away, cutting off all contact with Maggie after their wedding. Torn between my need for independence and my husband's loyalty to his mother, I felt isolated. Yet, seeing Jack so earnest, so committed to not repeating his brother's path, I relented. Okay, Jack. We'll keep things as they are for now, I conceded, trying to mask my disappointment. Thank you, babe. I know it's a lot. We'll figure something out, I promise, he said, pulling me into a hug that felt both comforting and confining. As days turned into weeks, my after-work routine remained unchanged. Maggie's house became a second job, one that paid in tired smiles and a sense of duty. My own dreams and desires took a back seat, tucked away like the old novels I no longer had time to read. A year has passed since that conversation, but nothing much had changed. If anything, things got even more intense. Every day after work, my second shift began, cooking, cleaning, running errands for Maggie. By the time I got home each night, I was wiped out. One evening, sprawled on our couch with aching feet propped up, I broached a subject that had been on my mind for a while. "Jack, don't you think it's time we think about having our own little family?" I asked, trying to sound as casual as possible, despite the butterflies in my stomach. Jack's face lit up, a stark contrast to my tired expression. "That's a fantastic idea, babe. Imagine a little one of ours running around. And hey, we could buy a bigger house, move in with Mom to help out. What do you think?" The thought of living permanently under the same roof as Maggie sent a chill down my spine. I was thinking more along the lines of just us, you know? Just our little family. "We can talk about that part later, let's just focus on the baby for now," Jack said quickly, probably sensing my hesitation. I agreed, knowing we needed a serious discussion about boundaries before anything was set in stone. Despite the unresolved living situation, we told Maggie about our plans to try for a baby. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "A baby, huh? That's wonderful. You two will make great parents." Her tone was flat, and I couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt, wondering if she felt like we were trying to replace her with a new family member. But I pushed those thoughts aside, focusing on the future. Months turned into a year, and despite all our hopes and efforts, nothing happened. I followed every health tip I could find, cut out alcohol, ate healthier, hit the gym more. Still, no baby. Worried, I booked an appointment with a specialist to see if something was wrong. Sitting in the sterile clinic, after countless tests, the doctor finally had some answers. "It's unusual, Lucy, but your blood work shows elevated levels of a hormone found in birth control pills. Have you been taking any form of contraceptive?" I stared at him, bewildered. "No, absolutely not. We've been trying to conceive. Why would I take birth control?" The doctor looked just as confused as I felt. "It's definitely odd. If you're sure about not taking any contraceptives, this shouldn't be happening. Sometimes, prescriptions can get mixed up." I thanked him, my mind racing as I left the clinic. The drive home was a blur. How could this be happening? I'd been so careful with everything, checking and double-checking everything I consumed. Did someone tamper with my medication? The idea seemed ludicrous, but desperation and confusion clouded my thoughts. That evening, as per usual, I was at Maggie's house, cleaning up after dinner when I noticed something that made my heart stop. An empty package of birth control pills peeking out from underneath some other trash in the bin. The room spun a little as I pulled it out, examining it. This had to be a mistake. "Maggie, can I ask where these came from?" I said, holding up the blister pack for her to see. My voice was calm, but inside, I was anything but. Maggie glanced over, her face draining of color as she saw what was in my hand. "Oh, those? I don't know, must be old," she stammered, looking anywhere but at me. "That's funny, because it looks recent. And I just found out I'd been having birth control in my system. Been wondering why we couldn't get pregnant," I said, each word sharper than the last, watching her closely. The air felt heavy, thick with tension as Maggie shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "Lucy, you have to understand, Understand what, Maggie? That you've been messing with my life? My marriage?" The shock was giving way to a burning anger, my voice rising despite my attempt to control it. Maggie sighed, a long, weary sound. "It's just, if you had a baby, then you'd stop coming around as much. Jack would stop. I can't lose him too, not like I lost his brother," she confessed, her voice cracking with emotion. "So you decided to play God with my body?" I was incredulous, feeling the sting of betrayal from someone I had trusted, someone I had cared for. "I'm sorry, Lucy. I thought I was protecting my time with my son. That's all." Her apology sounded hollow, doing nothing to cool my anger. I didn't have it in me to argue further. I left her house, a storm of emotions brewing inside me. At home, I waited for Jack, rehearsing the conversation in my head. When he walked through the door, I didn't waste a moment. "Your mom has been replacing my vitamins with birth control pills. That's why we couldn't get pregnant." I found the pack in her trash. I blurted it out, the words tasting bitter. Jack froze, his expression one of confusion that slowly morphed into disbelief. Mom? No, she wouldn't. She admitted it, Jack. She did it because she thought we'd stop visiting if we had a baby. After a moment of tense silence, he sighed, running his hands through his hair. Lucy, I know it sounds bad, but, you know Mom's been alone a long time. She was just scared. Can't you see that? Please don't be mad at her. Mad? Jack, she violated my body, our trust. How can you just stand there and defend her? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It felt like the world was upside down. I get it, it's messed up. But she's my mom, Lucy. We can get past this, right? Let's just forget it happened and move on, he said, almost pleading. Forget it happened? As if it were that simple. But I saw in his eyes that arguing would get me nowhere. From that day, I kept a vigilant watch over everything in our home. No more unsupervised visits to the medicine cabinet for Maggie. 2 months later, despite the odds, I found out I was pregnant. The joy was tempered by caution, given the recent betrayal. When we told Maggie, her reaction was as cold as ice. That's nice, she said flatly, then immediately asked about dinner plans as if nothing significant had been shared. Prepping for the birth of my baby became my new project, as intense as any marketing campaign I'd ever run. I signed up for prenatal classes, eager to learn everything I could about bringing my baby into the world as naturally as possible. Yet every class was a sharp reminder of my solo journey. Couples filled the room, hands entwined, while I sat alone, my chair next to me painfully empty. Jack made excuses for every session. Babe, you know I've got so much on at work, and Mom needs me tonight. Or, I'm just not up for it, you know how these things make me feel. It was always something. Feeling more and more isolated, I threw myself into planning for the birth. I chose a clinic specializing in natural water births, located outside the city, known for its serene environment and expert care. It wasn't cheap, but I had been saving every penny from the rental income of my apartment. This was about bringing my baby safely and peacefully into the world, and I wasn't going to cut corners. One evening, while dining at Maggie's, the conversation inevitably turned to finances. You know, Lucy, I heard those birthing centers cost a fortune. Why waste money when the hospital here does just fine? Maggie said, her tone more accusing than curious. I took a deep breath, trying to keep the irritation from my voice. It's not a waste if it ensures the health and safety of your grandchild, Maggie. I've got it covered. Jack, who had been half listening, suddenly tuned in. Covered? How's that? Well, I've got a reserve account from the apartment rental. It's more than enough to cover the costs, I explained, a bit reluctantly. Maggie's eyes sharpened, her interest visibly piqued. Oh, you've been saving up? That's good foresight. I nodded, feeling their gaze heavy on me, knowing I might have disclosed too much. Quickly, I steered the conversation elsewhere, discussing potential baby names to divert their focus. Despite the ongoing stress, I continued my solo visits to the prenatal classes, each time returning a little more empowered but also a little lonelier. The clinic staff was supportive, and I often stayed back to ask questions about the birth process. Each visit made me more certain of my decision. This was the right place for my baby to come into the world. With the countdown to motherhood ticking ever louder, I decided a short trip to visit my parents in their city was just what I needed. It had been too long since I had surrounded myself with family who were nothing but supportive and loving, a stark contrast to the tense atmosphere back home. My heart felt lighter as I caught up with old school friends and spent precious moments with my grandmother, promising her that my son would bear the name of my late grandfather. But barely a day into my visit, my phone buzzed with a call from Jack, his voice edged with urgency. Lucy, you need to come back. Now. Panic surged through me. What's happened? Is everything okay? Just come back, okay? It's important, he pressed, hanging up before I could probe further. Worried and confused, I packed up and headed back, my mind racing with possibilities of what could demand such an abrupt end to my visit. As I opened the front door of our home, the sight that greeted me sucked the air right out of my lungs. The house was a disaster zone, empty bottles, pizza boxes strewn across the floor, sticky stains marking the tiles. It looked like the aftermath of a wild party. Jack, smelling of booze and barely standing straight, waved a hand dismissively at the mess. I threw a bash to celebrate the baby coming. "Clean this up, will ya? I can't stand the mess." I stared at him, disbelief and anger swirling inside me. "You called me back for this? To clean up your party? Why couldn't you handle it?" He shrugged, a sloppy grin on his face. "Come on, Lucy. Don't be like that. It was a party for our kid." "A party that I wasn't even here for," I snapped back, my energy draining just thinking about the cleanup ahead. With a heavy heart, I started cleaning. Jack had already stumbled to our room, leaving me to deal with the chaos alone. The physical strain of bending, lifting, and scrubbing was immense, especially being so far along in my pregnancy. By the time I finished, my body ached, and I felt contractions starting, a sharp reminder that the baby was almost here. The next morning, labor kicked in full force. Alone and scared, I called a taxi to take me to the clinic. Jack, barely awake and nursing a hangover, mumbled something about meeting me there later. At the clinic, surrounded by medical staff, but devoid of the emotional support I so desperately needed, I gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. The pain of labor paled in comparison to the ache in my heart from doing it without Jack by my side. He showed up hours later, his congratulations feeling hollow and forced. "I'm here now, huh? Let's just focus on the little guy," he said, avoiding my eyes. The coldness in his voice stung, but nothing hurt more than Maggie's reaction, or lack thereof. When I called her with the news, her response was curt. "A baby shouldn't be shown off until he's at least a month old. Keeps away the bad vibes." Her words, so devoid of warmth, didn't surprise me as much as they should have. In a way, I was relieved. No visits from her meant one less thing to worry about. After what felt like an eternity, I finally brought my baby boy home from the clinic. The quiet of the house was a stark contrast to the chaotic events of the past few weeks. Despite the calm, an undercurrent of tension lingered, especially with Jack's nonchalant revelation that his mother had taken off on a vacation. A few days into adjusting to motherhood, I received the clinic bill. My heart sank when I saw the balance due, $5,000 more than what the insurance covered. Confident about my financial backup, I logged into my account to transfer the funds, only to find the balance shockingly low. Way below what should have been over $50,000. Panic set in, my breaths quick and shallow. Dialing Jack with trembling hands, I braced for his explanation. "Jack, there's hardly any money left in the reserve account." "What happened?" His reply was casual, dismissive almost. "Oh, yeah, Mom needed some cash for her vacation. You know, to unwind and all." "Jack, are you telling me you gave our savings, over $40,000, to your mother? It's our son's future, Jack. How could you?" My voice rose, a mix of disbelief and rising anger. "Babe, come on. You're blowing this out of proportion. And anyway, you stopped cleaning up at Mom's place, she's tired. She deserves some fun," he retorted. That was the final straw. His words echoed in my ears, each one chipping away at the last vestiges of patience I had for this marriage. By evening, I was sitting in front of a lawyer, divorce papers spread out in front of me. When Jack saw the papers, his reaction was not what I expected. No anger, no sadness, just a resigned, almost relieved, "All right then." He signed them with a steady hand, grabbed his coat, and left without another word, heading straight to his mother's place. Feeling a mix of liberation and deep sorrow, I decided it was time for me and my son to leave, at least for a while. We went to my parents' house, where I was greeted with warm hugs and soothing words, a stark contrast to the coldness of my now strained marriage. "Lucy, you need to talk to Jack's brother," my dad suggested one evening. "He went through something similar with Maggie." Hesitant but curious, I reached out to Jack's estranged brother. The conversation that unfolded was eye-opening. He told me about how Maggie had tried to control his wife's inheritance, how it tore their marriage apart until he chose his wife over his mother. Maggie had cut all ties with him in retaliation. "Lucy, she won't change. I learned that the hard way. You've got to look out for yourself and your kid," he advised, his voice heavy with the weight of experience. Hanging up, I felt a mix of emotions swirling inside me. Jack had chosen his mother over our family, just as his brother warned might happen. The realization was painful but clear. The final straw had been pulled, the last line crossed. I stood in the police station, a mix of resolve and nervous energy swirling through me as I detailed everything to the officer on duty. My voice was steady, though my hands trembled slightly. My husband transferred money from my account without my knowledge, and I believe he forged my signature to do it. Over the following weeks, a full investigation unfolded. It revealed not only had Jack forged my signature, but he had also given his mother access to the funds. The evidence was undeniable, and eventually, both were charged. In court, Jack's face was unreadable as the judge handed down their sentences. Both received suspended sentences for their crimes. Jack was also ordered to pay alimony for our son, ensuring at least some financial stability for our future. I reached out to the family of Jack's brother, driven by the conversation I had with him. They welcomed me with open arms. It turned out they were nothing like the monsters Maggie had painted them to be. Their warmth and acceptance were a soothing balm to the wounds left by my former in-laws. One sunny Saturday afternoon, as our children played together in the backyard, Jack's brother, Mike, threw a couple of steaks on the grill, and his wife, Sarah, handed me a chilled glass of lemonade. "Lucy, we're just glad you reached out. Mom, she can spin quite the tale," Mike said, flipping the steaks with a practiced flick of his wrist. Watching Danny laugh as he chased after his cousins, a sense of peace settled over me. "Thank you, both. It means the world to us to have family like you." As the kids tumbled around, their laughter filling the air, Mike leaned over and said in a conspiratorial tone, "You know, Mom always did like to be the center of the universe. But around here, it's just simple family life. No drama." "Exactly what we need," I responded, smiling at the simple truth in his words. Our gatherings became a regular thing, our children bonding as cousins do, forming connections that promised to last a lifetime. The holidays were particularly full of joy, the kids' excitement contagious, making each moment a bit brighter. My name's Anna. I sell houses, the big fancy ones with views, and the small cozy types that feel like yesterday's bread, warm and welcoming. My office is way up in the sky, or so it feels on the 22nd floor. It's a world of glass that reflects everything, the clouds, the birds, and the infinite hustle of the city. So, here's where it all starts. There's this guy, Mike. Not just any guy. The type that walks into a room and even the air takes notice. He started working at the firm next door about a year ago. The first time we met was by the coffee machine. It's one of those fancy ones that can do everything except drink the coffee for you. I was fighting with the machine, trying to get it to give me something strong enough to keep my eyelids from staging a protest. "Need a hand?" That was Mike. Smiling, like he knew the secret joke behind every little malfunction. "Yeah, unless you know how to negotiate with a robot," I snapped back, more out of caffeine deprivation than any real annoyance. He laughed, that easy kind of laugh that's infectious. "Let me try. These things are more sensitive than my mom's chihuahua." He fiddled a bit, pushed some buttons like he was playing an arcade game, and voila, the machine surrendered 2 cups of the darkest brew. "Mike," he said, handing me one. "Anna. Thanks," I replied, taking a sip. Heaven in a cup and just the jolt I needed. We started bumping into each other more. Coffee breaks turned into little chats about this and that. He was easy to talk to. He had a way of listening that made you want to tell him stuff you'd think was duller than watching paint dry. One day, we grabbed lunch together at a little cafe just a block away from our buildings. It was becoming a thing, us, talking. About work, movies, the mess of the world. You ever think about doing something else? Like, not selling houses? He asked once, picking at his sandwich like it was a puzzle. Nah, I shrugged. It's in my blood. Plus, I get a kick out of making people's dreams come true. What about you? Ever think of running away and joining the circus? He chuckled, shaking his head. Can't. My mom would miss me too much. There it was. Mike was a mama's boy. Not in a living in her basement playing video games way, but close. He lived with her, took care of her. Hell, she even came to his office sometimes, like she was checking in on her investment. I thought it was sweet. A bit odd, maybe, but sweet. I liked that he cared so much. It was rare. Life at the office and with Mike was like rolling with a fast current, and before I knew it, a year had whisked by. The casual lunches and coffee breaks had woven into something a lot tighter, a lot more serious. One Friday, the office was buzzing more than usual. Word gets around when something's up, and around here, it spreads faster than a wildfire. I was plugging away at my desk when Liz, a coworker from 2 cubicles down, strutted over like she had some hot gossip. Hey, Anna, everyone's saying he's gonna pop the question soon. You know, a ring, the whole shebang. She smirked, popping her gum. Let him talk, I shrugged, trying to brush it off, but my heart was racing. Mike hadn't hinted anything, but the thought sent a zing through my spine. Later that day, as the sun dipped below the horizon painting the sky in strokes of orange and purple, Mike suggested we grab dinner instead of just a quick bite at the cafe. Something about the way he said it, all nervous-like, had my stomach doing somersaults. We ended up at this cozy little Italian place he knew, tucked away from the usual hustle of the city. It was the kind of spot you'd miss if you weren't looking for it, with dim lighting and candles flickering on the tables. The conversation flowed easy, but I could tell Mike was edgy. He fumbled with his napkin, cleared his throat more times than needed, and kept avoiding eye contact. So, Anna, he finally started, his voice a bit shaky. We've been doing this, us, for a while now, and I... Spit it out, Mike. You're killing me here, I cut in, half joking, half dying inside. He chuckled, that nervous sort of laugh that didn't reach his eyes. Then, he took a deep breath, reached into his pocket, and slid a small box across the table towards me. I want to do this for real, Anna. Marry me? The room spun a little. I mean, Liz's teasing, the office bets, suddenly, it was all real. But looking into Mike's hopeful eyes, I felt the solid, sure thing settle in my chest. Yeah, Mike. Yes. I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. He grinned, relief washing over his face, and slipped the ring on my finger. It was simple, nothing too flashy, just like us. We spent the rest of the evening wrapped up in our little bubble, the chatter around us fading into a blur. The next week at work was like walking onto a stage. Heads turned, whispers followed me down the hall, and even the old-timers slapped Mike on the back and threw him knowing looks. And amid all the congratulations and cheeky comments, the bets came up again. Liz, with her big mouth, couldn't help herself. Gotta say, Anna, didn't think you'd say yes. What's the over-under on this lasting then? She laughed, nudging me. I rolled my eyes. Place your bets, Liz. But we're in this for the long haul. Hear that, folks? She's confident. Might want to reconsider your stakes, Liz announced to the room, which earned a round of laughter and more playful bets. But it was all noise. In that whirlwind of a moment, with a new ring on my finger and Mike by my side, the office could have fallen down around us, and I wouldn't have cared. We were doing this, and that's all that mattered. Our wedding was nothing fancy, just close friends and family in a small garden downtown. It was perfect, simple, intimate, and just about us. However, the real challenge started when we were supposed to set up our new life together. As we were packing up my apartment, Mike dropped the bomb. Anna, I've been thinking. Mom and I have been living alone in this rented house since Dad passed. She won't feel good alone without me. What do you think about moving in with her? It could save us a ton on rent and bills. I sighed. It wasn't what I wanted, but how could I say no? He was right, his mom had been alone a lot. Okay, let's give it a try, I conceded, trying to sound more upbeat than I felt. Moving day was a blur. His mom, Martha, welcomed us with open arms and an endless list of how things were done in her house. At first, it was fine. I thought, I can handle this. It's temporary. But as days turned into weeks, the true colors of living under Martha's roof began to show. She had rules for everything, from how laundry should be done to how the groceries should be stored. One evening, we were setting the table for dinner when she cornered me in the kitchen. "Anna, you need to start taking more responsibility around here. It's tradition for the daughter-in-law to handle the household," she stated firmly, her eyes pinning me in place. I was chopping vegetables, my hand stilling for a moment. "Martha, I work full-time, just like Mike. I'm happy to help, but we should split the chores equally." Mike walked in just then, and I looked to him for support. He was silent for a moment, then shrugged. "Mom's got a point, Anna. It's how she's always done things. Can't we just try it her way?" His words stung. I felt betrayed. How could he not see how unfair this was? 6 months in, the situation hadn't improved. If anything, it got worse. Martha started talking about moving to a bigger, more modern house. "Anna, you're in real estate. Start looking for something nice for us, a place where we can all live comfortably," she'd say, flipping through house listings. I tried to explain as gently as I could. "Martha, we really can't afford a new house right now. It's not just about finding a place, it's about being able to maintain it financially." She would wave off my concerns. "Nonsense. You'll find a good deal. You're good at your job, aren't you?" The pressure was mounting, and I felt trapped. I remembered the office bets about how long my marriage would last. It seemed everyone expected it to crumble. Determined not to give them that satisfaction, I gritted my teeth and bore it, hoping for a change. Just when I thought things couldn't get more chaotic, Mike's sister, Jen, showed up at our doorstep, tears streaming down her face, a toddler on her hip. The door barely swung open before she was halfway through it, her voice cracking with panic. "He kicked me out, Mike. He's done with me," said I cheated, which I didn't. She sobbed, collapsing into the hallway. Mike, ever the family man, wrapped an arm around her, guiding her to the living room. "It's okay, Jen. You can stay here as long as you need," he assured her. I stood there, mouth slightly open, trying to process another bombshell. As they settled down, I pulled Mike aside, my voice low. "Mike, this house is already packed. Maybe it's time we found our own place?" He shook his head, his brows knitting together. "Anna, come on, this is temporary. Just until Jen gets back on her feet. We can handle this." Handle this? It was like every day added another weight I wasn't sure I could carry. But I nodded, resigning myself to the new reality. The next weeks were a blur of chaos. Jen, bless her, was dealing with a lot, but that meant all her responsibilities fell to me. I'd come home from a long day at work to a house turned upside down by her 2-year-old whirlwind, Tommy. Toys everywhere, food splatters on the walls, you name it, Tommy did it. It felt like no matter what I did, it was never enough. The final straw came at dinner a few nights later. We were all sitting around the table, a tense silence hanging over us as we picked at our food. That's when Martha, with her usual flair for stirring the pot, dropped her next idea. "You know, Anna, you're out working all day, and clearly, the house is suffering for it. My friend's daughter, Lisa, she's looking for a job as an au pair. Maybe you should hire her to help out," she suggested, like she was doing me a favor. "Yeah? And who's paying for this au pair?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Martha smiled, a thin, knowing smile. "Well, you are, of course. You're the one with the job." I glanced at Mike, hoping for some support, but he just focused on his plate, silent. Something inside me snapped. Fine, if hiring this girl meant less time at this madhouse, then so be it. Alright, Martha. Have her come by tomorrow. We'll talk. I conceded, pushing my plate away, appetite gone. Lisa started the next day. She was a sweet girl, early 20s, and good with Tommy, which was a relief. She cooked, she cleaned, and the house seemed calmer. But it wasn't long before I noticed the giggles, the lingering look she shared with Mike when she thought I wasn't looking. One night, after I saw her touch his arm, laughing at something he said, I confronted him. "Do you think it's appropriate, the way Lisa acts around you?" I asked, my voice tight. Mike just chuckled, waving my concerns away like they were flies. "Anna, you're being ridiculous. She's just a kid, and I've known her since she was in diapers. Don't be jealous." Jealous? Was I? Or was it just the final wear down of living in a house where I felt more like an outsider than a family member? I shook my head, trying to push away the nagging doubts. "Alright, Mike. If you say so," I replied, but the seed of unease had already been planted. Living in a crowded house with your in-laws is like walking on eggshells, you never know which step will crack. But worse than the thin ice was the creeping realization that things were amiss. At first, it was a 20 here, a 50 there. Small change, maybe misplaced. Then it was earrings, a bracelet my grandma gave me. That kind of stuff doesn't just walk away. One evening, after noticing my favorite watch was gone, I confronted Lisa, the au pair. "Lisa, have you seen a silver watch around? It's missing." She gave me a wide-eyed innocent look. "Oh no, Anna, I haven't seen anything. Maybe it's lost?" Enough was enough. I installed hidden cameras in my room, a desperate move for desperate times. I wasn't going to accuse anyone without proof. But what I found blew the lid off any petty theft. It was a Wednesday, the kind of day where you just can't face going home. I sat in a cafe, laptop open, pretending to work, but really, I was watching the live feed from the camera. What I saw crushed me. Jen, Mike's sister, snuck into our room. She went straight for the drawer where I kept my jewelry, her movements too practiced. My heart sank. Then, the door opened again. It was Mike and Lisa. They weren't just chatting. No, they were, together. On our bed. It felt like a punch to the gut. I sat there, the taste of my coffee turning bitter. Anger boiled up, but a cold, calculating part of me pushed it down. No, I wasn't going to storm home. I needed a plan. Over the next few days, I collected every shred of evidence. Videos, times, everything. But revenge? That needed to be sweet, not hasty. One day, accidentally leaving my laptop open on a real estate listing was part of the play. It was a beautiful house, big yard, underpriced by half. Mike walked by, stopped, and stared at the screen. "What's this?" he asked, eyes lighting up. "Oh, just some listing I found." "Too bad we're not looking, huh?" I murmured, feigning disinterest. He grabbed the laptop, scrolling through the photos. "Are you kidding? This is perfect. Why wouldn't we look at this?" Martha came over, peering over his shoulder. "Oh, Mike. It's beautiful. Call them, now." Mike was practically bouncing as he dialed the number. "Hi, yes, I'm calling about the listing." "Yes, we want to put down a deposit." No need for a full check, we trust it's all good," he said, all but throwing our money at them. "Who's it going to be registered to?" I asked, my voice sweet as syrup. "Me, obviously. And you'll help with the payments, right?" He didn't even look at me as he spoke. "Of course," I replied, my smile hiding daggers. Everything was falling into place. Sitting back, I watched as they celebrated, oblivious to the storm that was about to hit. Mike, Martha, and Jen, they all thought they had won. But the game had just changed, and I was now playing for keeps. The ink was barely dry on the documents for the new house when Mike decided to throw a dinner that felt more like a victory lap than a family gathering. The entire crew was there, his mom, Martha, his sister, Jen, and yes, Lisa, who'd become too familiar in all the wrong ways. The dining room buzzed with a kind of giddy tension as I walked in, the air thick with smug satisfaction. Mike was grinning like a kid who'd just gotten away with stealing cookies. "All right, everyone, big news," Mike announced, standing at the head of the table with a glass of wine in hand. "We're moving into the new house next week. Mom, Jen, and, of course, Lisa here will be coming with me. Anna and Anna won't be joining us." Martha clapped her hands, almost bouncing in her chair. "Here are the divorce papers. I think Lisa suits my son better. You should leave here, right now." I took the envelope without a word, my hand steady as I pulled out the papers. I looked around the table, at their expectant faces, waiting for me to break, to make a scene. But I didn't give them the satisfaction. Instead, I signed each page, each signature a silent seal on my exit from this twisted soap opera. I stood up, my chair scraping back loudly in the quiet that followed. "Enjoy the house," I said, my tone even, a small smile playing on my lips. I walked out with my head held high, their laughter echoing behind me. They thought they'd won, but the game was far from over. A week after I'd moved out, living in a small but peaceful apartment, I got a call from Sarah, a friend who lived near the new dream home. "Hey, you won't believe what's happening." Sarah's voice was a mix of concern and disbelief. "Your ex and his circus moved into the house, and now there's a major stink, literally. The whole neighborhood is complaining." "Oh? What's going on?" I asked, a knowing smile creeping across my face. "It's the sewage, Anna. Something's wrong with their pipes, sewage is leaking out onto the street. It's a disaster. They've had plumbers in all day." The news was a delicious twist I hadn't anticipated so soon. "They're in deep, you know. Mike's trying to sort it, but he's out of his depth. No money to fix it properly," Sarah continued, her voice almost sympathetic. As I hung up, I couldn't help but burst into laughter. The perfect house, the perfect scam. The victory they thought they had was crumbling, just like the pipes in their precious new home. And as for me? I was finally free, breathing air that smelled a lot sweeter than the one surrounding them. After signing those divorce papers, it wasn't just a matter of packing up my old life, but gearing up for a battle. First thing, I met with a lawyer, Mr. Davidson, a no-nonsense guy with a reputation for being a bulldog in court. I laid out everything, hidden camera footage, dates, times, the works. Mr. Davidson, scanning through the evidence with keen eyes, finally looked up, his expression grim yet oddly satisfied. "Anna, we have a solid case here. Infidelity, theft, you want to go to court, you'll likely seek compensation." "That's exactly what I want," I told him, my voice steady, my resolve like steel. We filed for financial compensation for the betrayal and initiated a police complaint against Jen for theft. The days that followed were a blur of legal documents, meetings, and statements. Amidst this whirlwind, word got out about the divorce and everything else. I braced for whispers, for pity, or worse, mockery at work. But it never came. Instead, there was an unexpected wave of support. But not everyone was supportive. One afternoon, as I was walking out of a meeting, I saw her, Martha, storming into the office like it was her own house, fury radiating off her in waves. "Anna, you think you can just destroy my family and get away with it?" she screamed across the lobby. The office fell silent. Everyone's eyes were on us. I stood my ground. "Martha, you need to leave. Now." She took a step forward, her finger pointed accusingly. "I won't let you do this to us." Before she could continue, I gestured to the security guards. "Please escort her out. She's not welcome here." The guards were quick to react, taking Martha by the arms and leading her away as she continued to shout and struggle. It was a sad, desperate scene. The following weeks saw the legal battles unfold. Mike, faced with undeniable evidence, settled out of court, agreeing to a lump sum as compensation. His face, when he signed the papers, was a mix of anger and humiliation. Jen, caught red-handed on video, received a conditional sentence and was ordered to return all stolen items. Adding to their downfall, Mike became a joke at work. People would subtly lift their noses as he passed, snickering about the man from the stinky house. It wasn't long before he couldn't take it anymore and resigned. His departure made my daily life a lot easier. Not seeing him every day was a relief I hadn't expected. It had been 2 quiet, peaceful months since I had settled into my new life and small apartment in the city center. My days were filled with the normalcy of work, occasional lunches with colleagues, and evenings that I could now call my own. It felt like I was finally getting back to myself, the air around me lighter, my mornings brighter. But, like a shadow from the past, my phone rang one afternoon. The screen flashed Martha's name, dragging with it the weight of old, unpleasant memories. I hesitated but answered, curious despite myself. "Anna, you need to help us." Martha's voice came through, strained and desperate. It was so different from the last time we spoke, filled with accusations and anger. "What's wrong, Martha?" I asked, though a part of me already wanted to hang up. "It's this house. It's falling apart. The smell is unbearable, and we can't even use the bathrooms properly because of the sewage issues. Mike's drowning in debt because of the repairs," she explained, her voice cracking. I paused, taking in her words. The schadenfreude was tempting, but I pushed it aside. "Martha, Mike chose that house. He refused a proper inspection. What did you expect?" "But, Anna, we didn't know. His girlfriend left him, and Jen, she's gone too, ran off with some guy, leaving her son behind. We're struggling," she continued, pleading now. I sighed, the old anger and frustration stirring in my chest. "Martha, Mike made his decision without thinking of the consequences. You all supported him then." "I'm sorry, but you're on your own." I hung up before she could say anything else, cutting off the last thread that connected me to that part of my life. As I set my phone down, a wave of emotions washed over me. Pity, relief, liberation, it was a mix that left me both saddened and strangely empowered. I had moved on, literally and metaphorically. My new apartment, though smaller, was mine alone. I decorated it to my taste, filled it with plants, and every corner of it was stamped with my presence, my independence. That evening, I stepped out onto my small balcony, overlooking the bustling city streets. The air was crisp, and the city lights flickered like distant stars. It was my city, my life. I had fought hard for this peace, and I intended to enjoy every bit of it. Never again, I whispered to myself, a promise hanging in the cool air. Never again will I let anyone control my life. I turned back inside, feeling the solid ground of my decisions beneath my feet. The apartment was quiet, a sanctuary from the world and its chaos. It was a fresh start, a new chapter that I was writing on my own terms. My name's Erica. If you asked me how I started, I'd say with nothing fancy, just a girl from a regular family, with parents who loved me more than anything. My life was pretty standard until I hit college, where I met Jack. He was in the same restaurateur program, and man, did we click. We were both dreamers, aiming to carve out a little empire of our own. "Ever think about opening your own place, Erica?" Jack asked one night as we were cramming for finals over cheap coffee and day-old donuts. All the time, I admitted, not taking my eyes off the business plan spread across the table. Imagine a cozy little spot, authentic Italian, the kind of place where everyone feels like family. Jack grinned, his eyes lighting up. "We could do it, you know. Run it together. What's stopping us?" "Money," I sighed, a laugh escaping despite the truth of it. "Loads and loads of money. But life has a funny way of turning dreams into reality. When my parents passed away suddenly, a brutal car crash that took them too soon, they left me their house and a tidy sum of $400,000. After the grief, the silence of the house was overwhelming. It was Jack who stepped up. "Let's do it, Erica. Let's make your dream come true. For you, for them," he said one evening as we sat in the quiet living room, surrounded by memories. "Are you sure?" I asked, feeling the weight of the decision. "It's a huge risk." Jack took my hands in his. "I'm in if you're in, all the way." With that, we got married right after graduation and poured every dime and ounce of energy into our first restaurant. I designed the interiors myself, choosing warm yellows and reds, and we both developed the menu, testing recipes until midnight most days. The first few years were tough, no lie. There were nights I fell into bed with my shoes still on, too tired to move. But seeing our dream take shape, watching the 3 restaurants flourish under our care, made every aching muscle worth it. "Mom, why are you always at the restaurant?" my son, Danny, asked one day. He was about 7, his face serious as only a kid's can be. "Because it's our family's place, sweetheart. We built it so we could have a good life, you know?" I explained as I tied my apron, preparing for another long shift. "But you're always working," he pouted, and it stung because he was right. "I know, kiddo. But I promise, we're doing this for us, for our future. One day, you'll see it was worth it," I said, kissing his forehead before rushing out the door, the bell jingling behind me. After years of what seemed like marital bliss and bustling restaurant nights, I started noticing the cracks. Jack and I weren't the dream team we used to be. He was pulling away, distant, like he was always somewhere else even when he was right there. It was a regular Tuesday evening, and I was doing the books in the office when Jack walked in, late again, his jacket slung carelessly over one shoulder. "Jack, we need to talk about the Henderson event. They want to book the big room, and I can't make that call without you," I said, trying to catch his eye as he rifled through some mail. "Yeah, sure, whatever you think is best," he muttered, not looking up. That was his new thing, agreeing without listening. It drove me nuts. "Jack," I snapped, louder this time. "This is important. Can you please focus?" He finally looked at me, his eyes tired, or maybe just uninterested. "Erica, I trust your judgment. Just handle it, okay? I've got a lot on my mind." That was another thing. What exactly was on his mind these days? I used to know every thought he had. Now? Not so much. One night, I just couldn't take the guessing games anymore. We were in bed, the only time we ever were in the same room it seemed, and I turned to him, my voice shaky but needing the truth. "Jack, is there someone else?" The words felt like broken glass coming out of my mouth. He was silent for a long moment, the kind of silence that tells you everything you don't want to hear. "Yeah, there is," he said finally, his voice flat. No anger, no sorrow, just cold, hard fact. "It just happened. We've changed. I've changed. You've changed. It's not just one thing." The next day was a blur. I moved through the motions at the restaurant, smiling at customers, checking on orders, all while feeling like I was outside my body, looking down at some stranger living my life. When I finally got home, Jack was there, sitting at the kitchen table with that look on his face, the one that used to mean he had something serious to say. "Erica, I think we should talk about what this means for us," he said, as I dropped my keys on the counter, not ready to sit, not ready to hear it. "What's there to talk about, Jack? You've made your choice," I said, my voice cold, steadier than I felt. "We should get a divorce. There's nothing left to salvage." He didn't argue with that. Maybe he wanted to, or maybe he was just as tired as I was. Tired of pretending, tired of hiding, tired of whatever we had become. The following weeks were a whirlwind of meetings with lawyers and dividing up the life we had built together. I kept the house and half of everything else. It was fair, I suppose, but it felt like paying a huge price for a life I wasn't sure I wanted anymore. That's the thing about building something with someone, it becomes so intertwined that tearing it apart leaves everything looking a bit frayed, a bit worn, a shadow of what it used to be. Starting over is like standing on a cliff edge, the fear of the drop, but also the thrill of the unknown. After Jack, I spent a lot of time figuring things out, getting the restaurants running smooth without him, and just being alone. It wasn't bad, not really. Gave me time to think, to breathe. But then, like a cliché in some corny romance novel, Tom walked into my life, a lawyer with a killer smile that probably won too many cases on charm alone. He came into the restaurant one busy Friday night, his little girl, Emily, in tow. They were hard to miss. She had the same bright laugh as her dad. "A glass of your house red for me, and a lemonade for the little miss." Tom smiled at me, not knowing I owned the place. I was filling in for the hostess that night, just trying to keep busy. Throughout the night, I kept catching glimpses of them from the corner of my eye, him explaining bits of the menu to her, her listening so intently like the world depended on it. It was adorable. Made me miss having that kind of simple interaction, which had become so rare in my life. As they were leaving, Tom stopped by the register where I was cashing out another customer. "Thanks for a wonderful dinner," he said. "The food was excellent, and so was the service." "Glad you enjoyed it," I replied, handing the receipt to the customer before turning to give Tom my full attention. "And your company seemed pretty top-notch too." That was the beginning of everything. Tom started coming around more often, sometimes with Emily, sometimes alone. We'd chat, casual at first, then deeper conversations as the weeks turned into months. He was different, thoughtful, and real. One evening, he closed his menu and leaned back in his chair, watching me as I wiped down the counter. "Erica, would you like to go out sometime? I mean, outside of this place?" I paused, cloth in hand, not sure if I was ready. "Like a date?" "Yeah, a date," he smiled, looking a bit nervous himself. As things started getting serious with Tom, I knew it was time for him to meet my boys, Danny and Sam. I won't lie, I was nervous about how they'd take to him. They'd had a rough time after their dad and I split up, and bringing someone new into our lives felt huge. One Saturday, I decided to throw a small barbecue at our place. Casual, no pressure. Tom came over with Emily, and right off, I could see the boys were sizing him up, a bit standoffish at first, which was expected. Tom, bless his heart, didn't push it. He tossed a football to Danny. "Hey champ, think you can teach me a few tricks?" Danny, a natural athlete, lit up at the chance to show off his skills. "Sure, but only if you can keep up," he shot back with a grin. Sam, quieter and more into his books, hung back a bit. Tom noticed and wandered over to him later with a comic book in hand. "Heard you're the expert on these. Think you could explain the multiverse theory to me?" "It's way over my head." Sam's eyes, usually glued to his tablet, looked up, surprised and a bit impressed. Sure, I can do that." Watching them talk, seeing Tom genuinely interested in what Sam had to say, it eased my heart. And Emily, she was a gem, trying to include Sam in the conversation, showing off her own collection of superhero stickers. Just when I thought I had left all the drama behind and could finally get some peace with Tom and the kids, my past came knocking, or rather, ringing, on my day off. I was in the middle of making lunch when my phone buzzed with a number I hadn't seen in a while. It was Jack. My heart sank a bit, not ready to hear whatever he had to say. "Erica, you're not going to believe this, but I'm suing you," Jack's voice chirped through the speaker, too cheerful for the words he was spitting out. "You got more than your fair share in the divorce, and I've been talking to some very good lawyers. My new father-in-law's picking up the tab. We're going to make sure I get what I deserve, which is a lot more than what I walked away with." My head was spinning. "You've got to be kidding me. We split everything fair and square. You agreed to it." "Yeah, well, I've changed my mind. You don't deserve the good life, Erica. Not after how boring and ugly you turned out. I'm going to make sure you pay for it," he sneered, and I could almost see the smug look on his face. I couldn't hold back the tears. They started to fall, hot and fast, as the shock turned to anger, then hurt. Tom walked in right then, his face clouding over when he saw me. "Babe, what's wrong? Who was that on the phone?" It was Jack. "He's suing me. Says he didn't get enough from the divorce and now wants to ruin me," I managed to get out between sobs. A couple of weeks later, the nightmare continued when I bumped into Jack and his new wife, Laura, at the school parking lot. I was there to pick up the boys, and there they were, leaning against their car, looking like they owned the place. Laura spotted me first and smirked. "Look who it is. If it isn't the sad little ex-wife." Not taking very good care of yourself, are you, Erica? Don't worry, Tom will be out the door soon enough, just like Jack was. I felt my face flush with anger. Watch your mouth, Lara. You know nothing about my life. Jack chuckled, joining in. Oh, but we do, Erica. We know enough to see you're failing miserably. Maybe it's time someone else took over raising your kids. You're clearly not up to the task. That's enough, Jack, I shouted, my voice louder than I intended. The few parents milling about turned to look. You should be ashamed, talking like this in front of your own children. They walked away, leaving me there, fuming and humiliated. The drive back was quiet, my mind racing a mile a minute. How had my life come to this? Being threatened by my ex, insulted in front of my kids. But as we drove, my resolve hardened. Jack wanted a fight? He'd get one. Tom was already home when we arrived, and he could see the fire in my eyes as I walked through the door. Babe, you okay? You look like you're ready to go to war, he said, a worried look crossing his face as he came over to help with the boys. I am. I want to hire a private investigator, I said without preamble, dropping my keys on the counter with a clatter. Jack's up to something, and I want to know what it is. The next day, Tom set up a meeting with the investigator, a grizzled guy named Mike, who had seen more shady dealings than a street corner in a noir film. We laid out everything, and Mike nodded, scribbling notes in a worn leather notebook. It didn't take long for Mike to get back to us. The news he brought wasn't just good, it was golden. Jack hadn't changed one bit, still the same cheater he always was, but this time he was playing around with a stripper. I was sitting at the kitchen table when I forwarded the evidence to Lara, adding just a note. Thought you should know what your perfect husband is up to. The response was quicker than I expected. Lara called me, her voice choked with tears and something else, shame, maybe? Erica, I'm so sorry, she stammered out between sobs. I had no idea. I was so horrible to you, and now, Jack. Lara, stop. It's not your fault he's a jerk, I found myself saying, the anger softening as I listened to her cry. Look, I understand more than anyone what it's like to be lied to by that man. There was a heavy pause, and then Lara sniffled loudly. Can I help? I mean, I want to make this right. Not just for me, but for you too, Erica. I was taken aback. This was the last thing I expected. Let's meet. We can talk about it. Thank you, Erica. Really, thank you, she said, her voice cracking again. As I hung up the phone, a mix of emotions swirled through me. I had started this to protect myself and hit back at Jack, but now it felt like something more. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about setting things right. Somehow, against all odds, Lara and I were on the same side now. This battle had just taken a very unexpected turn. Sitting in the little cafe with the red awning, waiting for Lara, felt surreal. Just weeks ago, she was an enemy, laughing at me alongside Jack. Now, she could be an unexpected ally. The bell above the door jingled, snapping me out of my thoughts as Lara walked in, her eyes scanning the room until they landed on me. Her walk was determined as she slid into the booth across from me, clutching a bulky folder. Erica, thank you for meeting me, she started, her voice shaky but sincere. I nodded, straight to the point. What do you have for me, Lara? Without a word, she pushed the folder across the table. Everything you need to know about Jack's recent activities. I opened the folder, scanning the documents rapidly. My heart sank with each page. There were emails and texts between Jack and several of my top employees, offering them double their current pay to jump ship and join a new venture he was planning. This is just the beginning, Lara said. He's been spreading rumors about your restaurants. Claims of unsanitary conditions, poor service, even paid people to write bad reviews online. The world seemed to spin a little. And the lawsuits? He's gearing up to claim you've hidden profits, that you cheated him out of his rightful share during the divorce, she added, her eyes darkening. I leaned back, absorbing the blow. This was worse than I thought. Jack was playing dirty, trying to take everything I'd worked so hard to build. Does he know you're doing this? I asked, eyeing her carefully. Lara shook her head vigorously. No, and he can't know. Not yet. I can't believe I was so blind. Just beat him, Erica. Show him he can't push us around. I took the documents home and showed them to Tom, who read through them with a furrowed brow. We've got him, Tom said confidently after a long silence. With this evidence, we can not only defend against his claims, but go on the offensive. He won't know what hit him. Buoyed by Tom's confidence, I knew what I had to do next. The following day, I called a meeting with all my staff at the main restaurant. The air was tense as everyone gathered, whispering about the urgent summon. Thank you for coming on such short notice, I began, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. I'm sure you've heard rumors lately, bad reviews, talks of unsanitary conditions. It's all a targeted attack on us, by my ex-husband Jack. The room was silent for a moment before Marco, now my head chef, stood up. We're with you, Erica. We know the truth. We see how hard you work, how much you care. Jack's got nothing on you. Nods and murmurs of agreement followed, the team's solidarity palpable. Thank you, I said, feeling a surge of relief and determination. And I want to take this a step further. Starting today, we're installing live cameras in the kitchens. Let our customers see the truth for themselves. The announcement was met with applause, the team rallied by the proactive approach. I didn't stop there. I took to social media, posting a video explaining the situation. Come see for yourself, I invited our customers. Take a tour, watch our chefs at work. We have nothing to hide. The response was overwhelming. Bookings for kitchen tours came flooding in, and the community support was incredible. Our reservations spiked, people eager to stand with us against the underhanded tactics, trying to undermine our integrity. A week later, Jack called me and offered to discuss our differences. The meeting was set in one of those upscale places that Jack always liked, the kind where they charge you $10 just to breathe their air. As soon as we were all seated, Jack wasted no time. Erica, I'm willing to be generous here, he started, his voice oozing false charm. I'm ready to forgive you for all the trouble you've caused, and all I'm asking in return is a couple of your restaurants and, let's say, a small compensation of $1 million. I stared at him, stunned by his audacity. Then, the absurdity of his demand hit me, and I couldn't help but burst out laughing. You're joking, right? Please tell me this is a joke. I'm dead serious, Erica. It's more than fair, considering the circumstances, Jack sneered, looking at Lara. Tell them, honey. Tell them your dad's backing us up. Lara's expression was unreadable at first, then she turned to Jack, her voice calm but cold enough to chill the wine. Actually, Jack, there's been a change of plans. Jack blinked, confused. What are you talking about? Lara stood up, her chair scraping back sharply. She reached into her purse, pulling out a stack of papers. I'm talking about this, Jack. She threw the papers on the table, they scattered slightly, the word divorce visible on the top sheet. Jack's face went white as he picked up the papers, his hands trembling. Lara, what, why? Because I know about your affairs, all of them. Your sweet stripper was the final straw. Lara's voice broke slightly, but she quickly composed herself. And my father, he's indeed getting his lawyers involved, but not to help you. They'll be representing me in the divorce and suing you for everything you've done. She turned to me, her eyes softer. Erica, I should have believed you from the start. I'm so sorry for everything. I reached out, squeezing her hand briefly. It's okay, Lara. We both fell for his lies. But it's over now. Lara nodded, pulling her hand back and taking a deep breath. It is. She looked back at Jack, who was now slumped in his chair, his face buried in his hands. Goodbye, Jack. With that, Lara walked out of the restaurant, her head held high. The silence that followed was heavy. Jack finally looked up, his eyes red. Erica, please, I can change. Don't let her do this. Don't let her ruin me. Tom's laugh was harsh, echoing slightly in the suddenly too quiet restaurant. You did that all on your own, Jack. Erica has nothing to do with it. And as for that lawsuit you were so eager about, expect one from us for defamation. And trust me, we have more than enough to bury you. We stood up, ready to leave this mess behind. Jack remained seated, a broken figure who'd finally run out of moves. The courtroom was hushed as Tom and I waited for the judge to deliver the final verdict. My hands were clammy, clasped tightly together in my lap, while Tom, ever the rock, gave my hand a reassuring squeeze. The judge looked over the rim of his glasses, his voice steady and clear. In the matter of the defamation and damage to reputation brought by Ms. Erica against Mr. Jack, the court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Ms. Erica. It is ordered that Mr. Jack pay a sum of $500,000 in damages. A gasp went through the courtroom, mostly from Jack's side, but the sound was music to my ears. Tom leaned over, his whisper just for me. We did it, babe. You stood your ground, and you won. I could hardly believe it. After everything Jack had put me through, justice was finally served. I felt a tear slip down my cheek, not of sorrow, but of relief, of closure. But our legal victories didn't end there. Lara, true to her word, had gone after Jack with everything she had. Her father's lawyers were relentless, and Jack was ordered to pay a massive settlement for his infidelity and the emotional distress he caused. In the aftermath, Jack's restaurant empire began to falter. Saddled with debt and a tarnished reputation, he couldn't keep up. When his main restaurant came up for sale, Tom nudged me gently. You should buy it, turn it into something good. And I did. I purchased his restaurant at a fraction of its worth. One afternoon, as I surveyed my new property, Lara walked in. Since the trial, we'd found solace in our shared struggles and had become unlikely friends. Looks different when it's empty, doesn't it? She remarked, her voice echoing slightly in the vacant space. It does. But it won't be for long. I'm thinking of turning this place into a family-friendly venue, something the community can really enjoy. I shared, excited about the possibilities. We walked through the empty restaurant, planning and dreaming about what it could become. Lara, now free from Jack's shadow, was thinking about starting her own business, perhaps something in interior design. You've got an eye for it, I encouraged her. You helped me see the potential in this old place. As we stood there, talking about the future, I felt a profound sense of peace. The battles were over, the past finally put to rest. I had my family, my friends, and a future that looked brighter than it had in years. You know, I never thought we'd end up here, Lara said, gesturing around us. Me neither, I laughed. But I'm glad we did. It's funny how life works out, isn't it? As we left the building, the sun was setting, casting long shadows and bathing the street in golden light. I took a deep breath, feeling truly free for the first time in years. The road hadn't been easy, but it led me here, to this moment, this feeling of complete and utter freedom.